Endurance E-Racing World Championship Le Mans 24 Hours is brought to you by ESR Esports Network, Fleet Gaming, SimLab, Husingfeld, Simplexity, Acetech, and AMD Ryzen Radio.
Simplexity is a Danish designer and manufacturer of high-grade sim racing platforms. Their 3 different levels of platforms come in a variety of colors and configurations. Choose from the V4, built from 40 by 40mm extruded aluminium profiles, the V8 built from 80 by 40mm profiles, and the high-tier V12 built from 160 by 40mm extruded aluminium profiles. Prices range from 470 to 750 euros. Go to facebook.com/simplexity.eu and start a messenger chat to inquire more about the options for colors and customization.
Games? Do you like esports? Do you hate watching laggy streams of tournaments on 13-inch screens? Oh my god!
Of course you do, but you don't have to worry about that anymore.
He has a jump, son! Oh my god!
Good morning and welcome to the GTR24H for the 24 hours of Le Mans round 4 of the Endurance E-Racing World Championship. And we are getting underway with pre-race practice, and the race itself will be coming to you at 1 p.m. European time. That will be 12 p.m. if you are from the UK. I'm Yusuf Bin Sahel, and joining me in the commentary booth will be Ewan O'Leary for our pre-race practice session. Ewan, are you with me?
I am indeed, and Cam Rogers also here with me to bring all the action, all the build-up really, before we get this race underway in just under 2 hours. But yeah, looking forward to the race really, and I'll be on a bit later on, but I'll certainly be tuned in for the start of the race, where you and Alex will be taking us through it. But yeah, looking forward to this race, and yeah, there's a lot to be excited for, I think, here.
Another man who will probably be joining us a little bit later as well is Cameron Roger, and I've been told rather energetically that Cameron is here. So do we have a Mr. Roger as well with us?
Yes, we're all here. Getting ready to go. Obviously, still a couple of hours before the race is going to be getting underway, but we're looking forward to this race. 24 hours, plenty of time for action. Obviously, they had the qualifying session as well, but teams I'm sure will be getting their final practice in and hopefully getting themselves nice and ready for this race.
Okay then, so I'm assuming both of you have seen the juiciness that was qualifying and our 2 2-hour sessions. Should we just kind of kick things off with almost a review of each class, to be honest?
Yeah, I think that's probably the easiest way to do it, to be honest. We're going to start with, I guess the only suitable place to start with is the Hypercar class, with it being the fastest one. So, I think we'll go with that first. In these qualifying sessions, it was Drillers Esports really who were at the front of the field. It's not really a surprise to see that, certainly, but maybe the margin that they actually won qualifying one and in particular by is a little bit surprising. Henry Sinnick was very, very quick in practice on Thursday, and we knew that he was going to be good again yesterday, and he did perform 17.5 in the first session and 17.8 in the second, but both were good enough for a top spot. And even though it's an average over the two sessions, he will still probably be taking pole. The reason we don't actually know what the full grid order is, unless there's been another development in the last hour, is that there's still some ongoing inquiries and steward things going on. So that's why we don't actually have a full grid order yet. But pretty safe to say, I think, that Drillers Esports will be on pole for the race.
And Cameron, I mean, Ewan's mentioned how Henry Sinnick had a fantastic performance for PinSims Drillers, but Ibrahim Khan for Seawolf Net Race Motors, I mean, he was absolutely flying as well in that second qualifying session.
Yeah, Ibrahim Khan, he's a quite an experienced driver in R-Factor 2 now, so I'm not surprised to see Seawolf up there. However, I would expect potentially Drillers to be slightly faster in the race conditions, because in qualifying, obviously, you have 4 hours in total, so they have a lot of time to get that one lap brush. Whereas over the race, you have no chance to make any sort of mistakes. So I have to see how the qualifying pace actually then turns into the race pace as well.
Yeah, of course we will have to. So PinSims Drillers and I guess Seawolf, we kind of know are going to be, well, we don't know, but they seem to be the two quickest. They had a massive margin to the likes of E-Team Brett behind and Viaductin. And then, so what do we really make of the rest of the battle in the Hypercar class? Because Viaductin are our current championship leaders, but E-Team Brit were quicker, they look quicker. Maybe even Scuderia Basilia, but they were unable to make one of the qualifying sessions. So because of that 15-minute lap time that they then accrue, they will be starting from the back of the Hypercar class grid.
Yeah, they will. So it's a little bit of a shame for them, but I think they've actually got a really good lineup for this one. The only Swiss-entered team in the whole race. David Yunt, Mark Veit, Thomas Hinz and Mossad Ben Amar. I think that's one of the strongest teams, obviously, other than Drillers, who I think are probably favourites. But if you're looking for maybe an underdog to root for in one of the classes, then I think that Scuderia Basilia will be a great story. And don't forget as well that even though they haven't actually qualified here, they will be starting from the back of the Hypercar class and not the back of the whole field, because that's just plain dangerous at the start of a 24-hour race. They'll be promoted to 6th place overall, effectively. So all the classes will start together, just to make things a little bit safer, so we can have a clean start at the very least, and hopefully that precedes a clean race. But yeah, Scuderia Basilia definitely underdogs, but I think that they might be able to challenge the likes of Drillers and Seawolf if they get things right today.
And Cameron, if you wanted to be starting at the back of any class, it would be the Hypercar class, the smallest class on the field with just 6 drivers. And as you mentioned, Scuderia Basilia will be starting in 6th place. Do you think they have the pace to really get ahead of the likes of Viaductin and Elite Sim Sport Racing Team?
To be honest, I'd say yes. I've known a few of those drivers in that team for quite a while now, and they definitely are more the long-term sort of drivers to look out for in the race. They're not going to be the ones who hit in the front straight away, but they're probably just going to be there, be consistent, and pick up from anyone else's mistakes. And certainly, there's a few other teams, as you mentioned, that they might be able to get past. So I wouldn't count them out even starting from the back. And as you say, with their being the smallest category, I wouldn't surprise you if they maybe even pick up a podium by the end of the 24 hours.
Okay. Well, that is the Hypercar class. Our 6 entries: E-Team Brett, Viaductin, PinSims Drillers Esport, Seawolf Net Race Motors, Scuderia Basilia, and Elite Sim Sport Racing Team. But we then move on to our second class, which is the LMP2. And Cameron, I'll start off with you this time. Burst Edge Esport looked super fast, but it's not all a Burst Edge Esport show.
It's certainly not. They are, you have to say, they're probably the favourites in general, purely just because the experience they've had, not only in that car, but just in general. Obviously, they've that drivers in that car being the VEC champions, I believe twice for a couple of those drivers as well. Dennis Jordan, I believe he's twice champion. So they know what they're doing. They're very good, and they've got such a good driver lineup in that car. But as you say, there's plenty of other teams there. There's a pretty stacked LMP2 lineup, to be honest. Number of other teams you can look out for: One Move, Drillers, Rookie Monsters, Varga, Musto, another Rookie Monsters car. There's so many. Even Eidos Motorsport has a really good lineup as well. So I think LMP2 is probably going to be a really tight battle at the front, and probably one of those ones we're not going to know who's going to win until later on in the race, because there's some really, really good talent in that category.
Well, Cameron, I think Alex is going to be very happy that you mentioned Eidos Motorsport in that list. But Ewan, out of all of those team names that Cameron mentioned, for me, the one that really stands out is Varga Sim Racing, the 117, the Czech Republic team, because Marcel Cinček in qualifying was absolutely phenomenal, and the number 117 car and the number 5 of Burst Edge Esports, they were just in a class of their own. You know, for a moment they were actually ahead of a couple of the cars in the Hypercar class, which was just, you know, practically unheard of, really. So there is a lot of pace for both those teams. Do you think it might be a 2-horse show at the front, or can some of these other teams really get their nails in?
Well, obviously a lot can happen in the course of the race, so I wouldn't count out any of the other teams really, because as Cam said, there's such a stacked LMP2 grid, and I've been saying this all weekend. I think it's the most competitive category if we were to pick one out. So I think that if there's any class where there's going to be a few surprises, then maybe it is LMP2. But yeah, you say Marcel Cinček was really good in Q1, and then in the night qualifying they weren't quite as good. They had Yuri Toman driving instead towards the end. He was about a quarter of a second away from Jene Simončić, who took the pole in that one, so it's going to be very close to find out who's on the pole position, but it's going to be Burst and Varga on the front row. I don't know whether they're going to be 1 and 2 by the end of the race, but they've certainly got 2 great lineups. Daniel Wisner is going to be partnering Yuri Toman and Marcel Cinček along with Michal Schmiedl, and in the Burst car they've got Jesper Pedersen, who's extremely quick. We've seen that already throughout the races of the Nürburgring 24 Hours, if you remember, from a few months ago here at GTR. Jan van der Heide was also there along with Michi Hoyer, and obviously we've got Jene Simončić as well, so they're the real 2 big lineups in this one. But you've also got teams like Drive Seat Gaming, Eidos Motorsport, and even ProSim actually surprised me just a little bit with how quick they were, particularly in the first qualifying session, just 7 tenths away, but in the night time it's just seemingly really fell away for some reason, qualifying all the way down in 11th when the night fell, but in the daytime they were 4th place. So maybe when the sun draws in a little bit later on, they'll be right up there. Maybe they'll fall away throughout the night, but a lot can happen, and I don't think it's going to be a 2-horse race between Varga and Burst, although they are definitely going to be up there.
And Cameron, you know, Ewan mentions how nighttime qualifying can be a completely different thing from daytime qualifying, but you know, in those qualifying sessions you do have the luxury to being able to tweak your setup just that little bit, tailor yourself to the slightly cooler temperatures of the nighttime. But when we do get to that race, you can't change your setup, you know, and all of a sudden you find yourself in a situation that you need to decide whether you want to have a setup that is more leaning towards the, you know, the daytime, more leaning towards the nighttime. And we do need to remind everyone as well, there is rain coming, and this is a completely different aspect that the teams will have to be prepared for.
Yeah, absolutely. There'll be certain drivers who actually prefer nighttime driving, I'm sure, as well, which is possibly a factor. And obviously in the qualifying session, you don't have so much time to adapt, and maybe you have a certain driver lineup, depending on the driver availability. That was also hindering when you had your drivers out there. But as you say, with rain coming as well, that's going to play into a mix, because they've only got these last couple of hours now to just tweak their setup, because once they get going on the race, you can't change anything, obviously, apart from the rear wing in the pit stop. So you really have to get yourself in a good position now, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's certain teams who actually practice certain aspects of these, maybe on their own server or offline, where they set the conditions exactly to how they want it, try and tweak the setup a little bit, because in a 24-hour race you have to be prepared for everything, and that is why generally at the end of a 24-hour race the best teams win, because you can't just have a lucky or a good couple of hours, you got to be good for the whole 24 hours.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned that as well, Cameron, because, you know, while we do have our official practice sessions, the difference between, you know, the IRL, you know, 24-hour series and the GTR 24-hour series is that, you know, one is virtual, which means that the teams can go onto an offline practice session, they can change the server settings, they can add some rain, and they can get some practice in, which is always a good thing. But I guess the key thing to remember is that those settings, you know, those conditions will never be exactly the same as the official server settings.
Exactly, and that's the kind of draw that you have to practice on these servers, because you also, if you're doing it offline, you also don't have the traffic to deal with, and sometimes people who are a bit less experienced with endurance racing will need that practice just to get themselves accustomed really to what is going on, and how to deal with traffic at Le Mans. It may seem easy to excuse me, it may seem easy to some people because they've been doing it for so long, but for some others it really is very difficult. So yeah, that's why people would really prefer to go on or I certainly would if I was driving. I'll prefer to be on the online one, just to make sure those, because as you say, you get those conditions perfectly set, you can have it basically how you want to, but it's almost certainly not going to be like that in the race. You might get lucky, you might get some favourable conditions to your setup and your driving style combination, but the chances of you actually getting lucky like that is quite slim. So it's probably best to just practice on the official one, and that's why we've got things like the official practice which we had on Thursday, things like the warm-up session which we've got going on at the moment. But yeah, it's a pretty testing time for these guys at the moment, because you've been practicing with this setup for so long, and we're seeing these guys out there at the moment. Are they going to be making any changes to the setup? Because not everybody's going to get to drive and comment on it if you're in the online server, because you can only have one car out at once, obviously. So that's a bit of a predicament really, because you could take a risk and change the setup, but if somebody doesn't like it, then they're going to have a pretty miserable 24 hours.
Yeah, and it always helps to have, I guess, you know, one man who is the setup man, let's say, and a driver that everyone in the team can trust to make those setup changes. However, we've been talking about the likes of Burst Edge Esport, HM Engineering, IDOS Motorsport, the 117 of Arga Sim Racing, as, you know, the kind of teams to watch out for. But let's not forget, in the LMP2 class, we have a battle for the championship going on. Team Rookie Monsters on 64 points, ID Sim Sports just 4 points behind, and One Mover Esports a further 32 behind. It's, you know, this is a battle for the championship, and Cameron, it feels weird that these aren't the teams that, you know, are almost our primary focus for the Le Mans 24 hours.
Yeah, this is the interesting factor for this championship, is that, you know, as always, more teams sign up for Le Mans as there is in, you know, in most championships that have a Le Mans race. Everyone wants to do a 24 hours Le Mans, but that also then takes points away or gives points to other teams who get involved in the championship. But as you say, there's only a 4-point difference between ID SimSport and Team Rookie Monsters, so you got to think about how you want to structure your race, because ultimately you only need to battle the other team in terms of the championship. However, if you start getting involved with other teams and other battles, and maybe someone who's just trying to win the race, you don't want to get caught up in anything, because at the end of the day, winning the championship is sort of the important factor here. Winning the Mans, yes, it would be fun, but even if you come sort of third or fourth and still win the championship overall, that's probably the safer option if someone's being a little bit hairy about you and you don't want to get involved in an accident.
Yeah, and I guess with us having double points here at Le Mans, it does mean that Team Rookie Monsters are only 4 points ahead of ID Sport. It's pretty much whichever of these two, if they are in the top 10, whichever of the two are ahead of the other, they win the championship. And speaking of Team Rookie Monsters, yesterday they were, well, I want to say caught, but they were under investigation because right at the end of qualifying, the LMP2 Team Rookie car was caught literally pushing the GT3 Team Rookie cars down the Mulsanne straight, and as a result they ended up going about 2 seconds quicker in the middle sector, and it promoted Simon Marshall in the GT3 class from about 7th to 2nd. I'm not sure if there's been an official verdict given on that, but Ewan, what were your thoughts particularly on the incident?
Well, I wasn't tuned in at the time because I was elsewhere, but having heard about it, that's quite a no-no. I know that in pretty much every league I've commentated in, you're not really allowed to push other drivers, even if they're out of fuel and you're trying to just get them to the finish. You can't do it because it's well, you just can't. It's one of the rules. So yeah, that's especially when you're doing it to your teammate, because. Yeah, I don't know. It just wouldn't. You wouldn't do it in real life, would you? So it just doesn't make sense to do it here either, especially to your teammate, because otherwise you'd have loads of people getting a hypercar and a GT together when you're teammates, and then just pushing the other one. It would cause quite a stupid sight, really, especially down the Mulsanne straight. So yeah, it's not allowed, and I would think they will be punished for that. I'm not sure who would get the punishment though. The GT3 would definitely get demoted by a few positions because it's gained lap time, but would the 37 also get demoted? I'm not entirely sure, but don't forget they've also got the 337 of Rookie Monsters. They've entered 2 cars into this race, so yeah, that's driven by, let me find out, Taylor Lane, Angus Tong, Kashif, that's a difficult name to say, if it's Qatar or something like that, Chris Tarberton and Dylan Tarberton. They're all driving the other Team Rookie Monsters car, but I would argue that maybe it's the slower one. And judging by the qualifying order so far, we could probably go along with that. But yeah, they've got 2 cars here. Might get punished for that little misdemeanor in qualifying, but it's only qualifying after all, so it's not going to affect the outcome of the race too much, I wouldn't imagine.
And Cameron, what were your thoughts on the incident?
Yeah, it's just one of those things you just shouldn't do it, to be honest. Everyone pretty much knows pushing cars, things like that, you shouldn't do it, especially to get an advantage like that, pushing a slower class down the straight to obviously give them a higher top speed than is pretty much possible in the car. Yes, it's a little bit naughty, and they probably should be penalised. Obviously, we'll leave the stewards to discuss the severity of that, but yeah, I think they definitely should get a penalty.
Okay, and there are some other additional topics that have come up due to that entire investigation, which I may be able to bring up a little bit later, but I think that kind of sums up our summary really of the LMP2 class. So I think we can make our way to the GTE class, and and I'll start off with you, because in that GTE class we saw a pretty good battle for the top of the GTE class, and it was pretty much a 4-way battle in both qualifying 1 and in qualifying 2.
Yeah, it was. I would maybe argue a 3-way battle for the pole position, but in the race, it could change around. The 51 WOSR Zone Performance Porsche was definitely up there and took Q1. Jimmy Nisula took night qualifying, then just a little bit later on, and by a good 8 tenths, I believe. So yeah, he was going very quick indeed in the end there. Wojtek Polesny also from Deuce's Motorsport Club got 3rd in both of those sessions, so you would imagine he's going to be 3rd when this race gets underway as well. And Musto GT Sports were kind of there or thereabouts, kind of in a bit of a no man's land really, faster than everybody else, but not quite as quick as the front 3. And they're championship leaders at the moment, battling with Simply Race, and we'll talk about that in a little bit or in a moment. But I can't find them on the night qualifying list right at the end of the session there, so I don't know if they turned up at all for that. And if they didn't, then they're almost certainly going to be at the back of the GTE class.
Yeah, they might very well be, and I'm pretty sure Musto GD were in the second qualifying session. I'm fairly certain I remember seeing, I think it was David Greco who was putting in some laps, but I may be mistaken. Cameron, Musto have themselves a lead in the championship. It's only 7 points, so it is easily surmountable. And, I mean, in qualifying 1 anyway, they looked much, much quicker than the British team.
Yes, they have been very quick. That Musto car is stacks. Their line, that is probably one of the best lineups I've ever seen for a GTE car as well. So there's no reason to doubt them. But if they are going to be starting a little bit further back, as Kian is suggesting, Ewan is suggesting, I think they might, that might be a little bit more difficult, because in GT it's generally a little bit harder to overtake, and there is quite a few more cars. But it does look like for the Simply race entry, it doesn't have, at least on the sheet that I've got, they don't have some of those sort of the bigger name drivers that they had, I believe, in Matsusaka last time out. So I believe the lineup may not be quite as good. So we'll have to see how that one turns out in terms of the pace. Obviously, as we go through the race itself, but certainly Musto, I'd say, are the ones to look out for overall. But if someone comes and has a good race, there's no reason why anyone can't come and do the win. But I would say overall, looking at the drive lineups for this specific race, I think Musto have the edge.
Okay, and it's good as well that I mean, this is the first class of the 3 that we've talked about where the championship leaders are well and truly in the fight for, well, not only for pole and qualifying, but they look to be in with a shout for taking the win in the race as well. But of course, in that GT class, we can't count out the likes of Deuce's Motorsport Club, because Wojtek Polesny was very quick.
Yeah, of course, and all the other cars that are in that class. I was actually really surprised by Satellite Racing in qualifying, and Jimmy Nasula. He'll probably be on pole if all the investigations and things go their way. Then I think that they'll be on the pole position for this one. So they're ones to watch out for. I was going to tip them a little bit more for the race actually, because I'd say they're maybe a more consistent team rather than an all-out pace team. But Jimmy Nasula, the Finnish drivers, just completely surprised me almost with that one, but pleasantly so. And the 51 as well, also a little bit of a surprise. I definitely thought they'd be up in qualifying, but it remains to be seen whether they're going to actually be there in the race, because obviously it's a whole different story, and being consistent over the race distance is very different. But yeah, in this championship, I don't know really. Simply Race have maybe not got a stronger team than Musto, as Cam said, but they've got guys like John Monroe who have been right up there in the actual sprint series which we've had. We've also got Matt Webb, Olivier Fortin also there, and an unknown driver yet to be confirmed, but they'll be getting that confirmed pretty quickly, you'd imagine. Yeah, they're just a little bit off Musto GT Esports at the moment, but I think that they will be up there in the race, and it's almost a similar situation with those two. Whoever finishes ahead will probably end up winning the championship. And once again, like we've seen in the LMP2 class, none of them look really in contention for the race win. Maybe Musto are just there or thereabouts, and if they can really be consistent in the race, then they will be up there. But Simply the Race is looking a real long shot to win the race at the moment, but yet they can still win the championship. That's the kind of crazy thing about this. The championship winners are more than likely not going to win these races in the categories.
Yeah, and Cameron, I will throw it to you, and I will leave our viewers in your capable hands.
Cam's there. I don't know if he's there.
Hello.
Oh, he's there. He is there. Yeah, we were just going on half an hour then into this broadcast, and then about an hour and a half away from the race start. I wonder if there is, I believe maybe I've got a starting order here. Alex has sent me something. Let's hope it's the actual starting order. I think it is. So yeah, we'll actually, I think we should probably take a commercial break first, and then after the break, I think we will get into the qualifying order, as it has just been confirmed, just been sent to us as well. So we'll get our teeth into this after the break. But you're currently watching the GTR24H build-up show for the final round of the EEWC. In a few minutes, we will be picking the bones out of the starting order. So don't go anywhere. There's still an hour and a half before the race.
The Endurance E-Racing World Championship Le Mans 24 Hours is brought to you by ESR Esports Network, League Gaming, SimLab, Husingfeld, Simplexity, Acetec, and AMD Ryzen Radio.
Do you hate watching laggy streams of tournaments on 13-inch screens? Oh my god!
Of course you do. But you don't have to worry about that anymore.
He has a jump, son!
Simplexity is a Danish designer and manufacturer of high-grade sim racing platforms. Their 3 different levels of platforms come in a variety of colors and configurations. Choose from the V4, built from 40x40mm extruded aluminium profiles, the V8 built from 80x40mm profiles, and the high-tier V12 built from 160x40mm extruded aluminium profiles. Prices range from 470 to 750 euros. Go to facebook.com/simplexity.eu and start a messenger chat to inquire more about the options for colors and customization. Welcome back to the GTR24H EEWC final round here from Le Mans, and we're excuse me, I've got some fun. Well, we're currently in the build-up session. There we go. Got some in the build-up session just an hour and a half before this race. We've just been handed, by the way, the grid order, so we'll really be able to see what's going on with this now. I don't believe there were any penalties actually handed out for anything in this race, because nothing was actually. There were no protests actually in the thing, so I think that everything is okay in that respect. But as we suspected, it's Drillers Esports who are going to be taking pole position here for the race. It's Seawolf Net Racing second, E-Team Brit third, along with Viaduct and Elite Simsport, and then Scuderia Basilia, and then we've got some starting drivers to go through as well. But yeah, as we expected, Drillers Esports are going to be on the pole position here. Don't forget, it's an average of the 2 lap times from Q1 and Q2, but even though there was an average taken, Seawolf was still a good second away from Drillers, so a pretty commanding victory actually for the number 10 team there.
Yes, so the Hypercar category is actually looking quite interesting. However, then Drillers, their average time ended up being 1 second quicker than Seawolf, which is, considering how this track can often actually lead to some quite close times, but 1 second is quite a lot. Obviously, you know that Driller's car is very, very experienced. The number 10, they have quite a lot of experience in this car, already doing a season of VEC, and they've got some really good drivers in there with Antonovsky, Cynic, Quico, and Hemmingson. So I think that's going to be certainly a car to look out for, but I would not rule out any of these cars from doing a little bit of an upset, because one thing that I know specifically from the number 10 Drillers Esports car is they're very quick, but some of them are a little bit inconsistent and often have maybe little crashes in traffic and that sort of thing. And this is that point I was making earlier. It is a 24-hour race. You've got to be getting to the last couple of hours and seeing where you are. There's no point going 110% in the first 6 hours and then binning the car before you even get to the night. So hopefully they realise that. Obviously it's a bit of a smaller class as well, so there's less to really care about dropping back. You still probably will be able to get a podium, so that is a good fight to look out for. However, obviously Viaductin as well are still in there, currently leading the Hypercar Championship as well, so they obviously don't want to get too involved with anyone else's battles, because I believe on 54 points they're still looking pretty good to be taken at, even if they have a bad race here.
Yeah, it looks like that is the case here for this one, but it is interesting that you it's happened again. Wait a sec. There we go. It's interesting that you say that the Drillers Esports Academy may be just a little bit inconsistent. Now, I don't know if you remember this, and I don't know if you were on commentary at the time, Cam, but if you think back to the Nürburgring 24-hour race that we had here at GTR in about May, June time, where the actual race was supposed to actually be, but we had one around the same time, virtually, of course. The Drillers Esports team were right up there. They had that great battle. I think it was Hemmingson battling with Pedersen, which is a little bit confusing at the time. It was Burst Esports versus Drillers Esports, and they had a fantastic battle in the early hours of the night. And then just before midnight, just as I was about to leave, they had an accident at one of the corners, just after Adenauer Forest. I can't remember what corner name it is, but the double left-hander, they had a pretty big accident. They got into the wall, got suspension damage, lost a lap, and then they had another crash a little bit later down the line. So I can see what you mean by that inconsistency maybe that they might have, but they've definitely got the strongest driver lineup on paper. Timotash Andonovsky, Henry Cynic, Jeroen Quico and Martin Hemmingson. That overhauls any team any other team really that's in this category at the moment. But I think that you're right, they're going to have to really keep their wits about them really if they want to actually win this race, because it's a marathon really. It's not a sprint at all, and there's going to be a lot of traffic for these Hypercar cars to actually deal with throughout the 24 hours.
Yeah, that is probably the best way of saying it, actually. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Obviously, it ends up turning into 24 singular hours of sprinting, and obviously then you change drivers every couple of hours. So that's what it ends up turning into, but you can't be making mistakes. And this is one thing myself, obviously I raced this race last year when we were in Viborg with my team Flag to Flag, and one of the issues that I had was, I think it was twice in the race I crashed, and so it doesn't matter. All of the good work, all of the good pace I actually did put in is sort of irrelevant because I crashed twice, and then one of those we actually had to rejoin the server, so we lost a few laps from that. And as soon as you do something like that, obviously that just completely takes you out of contention for the race. So you've got to be keeping in there, even with a 1 second advantage that Pinsim Drillers Esports did have. They've still got to make sure they're getting there, and I do think we're certainly going to be looking, if it's just a clean race the whole way through, I do think we are going to be looking at them getting a victory, but never count out any of the other drivers or teams.
No, you can't count them out at all, and we have got some starting drivers as well that we're looking out for here. Obviously, Marcel Cincic is listed as starting the Drillers Esports Hypercar. I don't think that's quite correct because he doesn't belong to that team. Marcel Cincic will be starting the Varga Sim Racing LMP2, and we'll talk about that category in just a moment. But Bobby Trundley is down to start the E-Team Brick car. The Viaducting guys are using the same rig, which is not on, which is within the rules, by the way, in this series. You can use the same rig, and of course they all do. Normally at the 24 Hours of Le Mans, because it's normally a LAN event. Obviously that's not possible this year, and hopefully it will be next year. But that will be a slight advantage for them. They won't have to wait for the driver swaps and etc. When they're doing them, because they're just going to be jumping into the same car on the same rig, we believe. So that will save them just a little bit of time.
In some ways, it might actually be a slight hindrance as well. Obviously, I would assume, because Viaducting have been here for the last couple of races in the whole season as well, so I assume they're probably used to this by now. But one thing that I struggled with when we went to the LAN event in Viborg was getting the rig set up to multiple drivers, because obviously when you're at home in your own rig or your desk or however you got it set up, you can have your pedals, your wheel, your monitor, seat position, everything like that you can set up to how you want it. But then when you go and share the rig with 2, 3, 4 other drivers, that can be a little bit hard to get it perfect for everyone else. For instance, I wanted a slightly different setting on the brake pedal, but the other 2 drivers couldn't drive it, so I just had to deal with it. And it's those compromises that you have to make when you're sharing the same rig, which is one reason why a LAN event is quite cool in that respect. So hopefully they've sorted out all the kinks that can come with that as well.
Yeah, I didn't quite consider that actually, but it's just like a real car, isn't it? Really, you've got it all set up to yourself. That's all well and good. But especially if you're sharing, I know that if I was sharing a car with some guy who's 6'6", then I would be not able to touch the pedals pretty much, because I've got a small guy. So if that has to be a consideration for those guys. But would that be something that you might change? I don't know how easy it is. I guess it depends what kind of rig you've got, but how easy is it to change those kind of things mid-race? And would people maybe even consider changing a few things in a pit stop so that you're not disadvantaged because you're in the same rig?
Yeah, so we had a sliding chair in our rig, so we were able to move it forward and back, but that was about it. So everything else, obviously, you can't really change, because in a pit stop you don't actually have that much time, because as soon as obviously the driver jumps out, I should say, when they get to the pit box and they jump out of the rig, you only have, literally a handful of seconds, because the driver needs to get in, they need to get comfortable, maybe put on their gloves, because most drivers sort of race with gloves nowadays as well, so you've got to get all that ready, got to maybe get a pillow under you, because that's what we ended up doing as well, sitting on or having a pillow behind your back, and also you only have a few seconds, then you've got to get in, calm yourself down, get ready to go out. So there really isn't that much time to do anything, but yeah, sliding seat is about all that we had, but I'm sure some other teams with much bigger budgets would have maybe even like a movable wheel mounting position as well sometimes. So yeah, that is quite a cool factor, but obviously we are as an online race, so a couple of teams will have a slight potential advantage in that category, but as we look down, there's actually quite a few teams using the same rig, so I'm sure we'll get to them as we get to the later categories in a moment.
Yeah, it's mostly actually not the prototype teams, mostly GT teams who are using the same rig, but yeah, we're not there yet. We'll get to those guys in a few moments' time. Just one more thing on this interesting debate. I didn't realise it was quite such a deal, really, having the same rig and having all these adjustments that you have to make. But Nick Newcomb, with his first piece of information, I'm sure of many throughout this broadcast, he often feeds me a lot of information throughout these races, so stuff I just don't know, because because I'm not very clever. But yeah, Nick says the pit stop time has been timed so that those who are not in the same location aren't disadvantaged to those who are in the same location and using the same rig. So that's going to not be, in terms of pit stop time, it would normally be a disadvantage, and that's why in some leagues it's actually banned. But in this one, it's not banned, and it's not a disadvantage either to not be in the same location. And obviously in 2020 that is definitely a good thing, and also in any year really, because if you think about it, these people are in different locations a lot of the time, and that can be an advantage, especially if you've got an American or Australian driver. I know that teams like the Scuderia Brasilia team have got drivers who are from other continents of the world. Davignon, for example, the registered owner of that team here at the final EEW race of the season, he is from Switzerland here in Europe, but he's got one of his teammates, Thomas Hinz, is obviously Australian, and that's going to be a big advantage for some of these teams, especially when it gets to the middle of the night.
Yeah, that is the biggest advantage actually of having an online race. My team, we used to have this as well. A couple of years ago, we had a guy called Nate, who was Canadian, and in some ways it was kind of unfair because we always used to give him night stints, but that's because it was logically the most possible or the most reasonable, because obviously we'd do the first bit of the race, then it would become night in Europe, and then obviously he would then still be in the evening or in the afternoon, so he would then be able to do some night stints. And having that is actually a real big advantage, because fatigue is what gets a lot of people. There's always, if you watch a 24-hour race and you sort of go to sleep at like 1 o'clock in the morning, and then you wake up again at like 9 o'clock, turn back on the stream, and you're like, oh, 5 cars have crashed. That's because overnight, that's when all this stuff starts happening, when the tiredness starts kicking in. And drivers who manage that the best and use these circumstances to their advantage are obviously going to come out on top. So I wouldn't be surprised if a couple of teams try and do some interesting things with their driver times to use the advantage of it being an online race.
Yeah, and that's obviously not a benefit they've had in the past here for the final EEW race of the EEWC race of the season. So I think we've talked about the Hypercar class enough now. Those 6 cars, we can finally lay them to rest. But Drillers Esports are on the pole ahead of Seawolf Net Race Motorsport, and we'll be talking about them a little bit more throughout the race, of course. And the overall winner is probably going to come from one of those 6, of course. But we are now going to move on to LMP2, because this is the category where it is incredibly close, just looking at these times at the moment. Burst Edge Esport are going to be on the pole position ahead of Varga Sim Racing, Eidos Motorsport, Drive Seat Gaming in 4th, just ahead of the other Drillers Esports car at number 17. So this is a very, very close category. Just under 0.04 of a second separate Burst Edge Esport and Varga Sim Racing. So those two are definitely the quickest out of the two. But Eidos Sim Sport definitely lurking there, as are Drive Seat Gaming. There's a lot of teams that can win this race from here. If you just think about it, Musto DD Esports are in about 8th place, and that is not where we're accustomed to seeing them. So it's a really sort of jumbled up grid with the class of the field we've got here.
Yeah, this is a really cool system to have the aggregate qualifying as well, because it means you can't just get one, lucky or one random lap in a session. You have to do 2 good laps, and that is exactly what Burst Edge Esport and Varga, the number 5 and number 117 cars, were doing. And it's pretty incredible. After 4 hours of qualifying, there was only a 400th between them. So this is going to be so close between these guys. They have both got really good lineups, so I wouldn't be surprised if these two have a really good battle. But as you say, a number of other cars behind them have really good lineups. And for instance, for Musto, who you were saying, they're sort of down the way a little bit. Musto aren't always a sort of prototype team with how they've race. I mean, I know they've got a couple of there are 2 GTs, one in the GTE and one in the GT3 category as well. That's sort of more their forte, I'd say. So I I wouldn't expect them to go up too much, but ahead of them, there's so many good teams, and because there's so many LMP2s as well, I think this is going to be a really good battle, and you've got no chance for a mistake. I think the ones who are probably to look out for might actually be IDOS, so just a bit behind them, because they're only about 4-5 tenths off in qualifying, so I have to see how that translates to the race, but they've got a very good lineup as well, so I think that this LMP2 category, especially between Burst and Varga, is going to be really, really good.
Yeah, it definitely is. Those LMP2 cars are going to be doing about 10 laps on a tank of fuel. We've learned here at Le Mans. They've not got very big fuel tanks at all, so that means that they're just not going to be on there for very long at all. And they're going to be pitting quite a lot throughout the race, about 40 minutes, I believe it is, maybe even less than that when they've done their 10 laps. But yeah, it's still going to be very interesting, if a little bit hard to follow. Only 75 litre fuel tanks. As Nick Newcomb informs me of, so that means a very short amount of stint length. But yeah, Musto. Let's just look at their driver lineup. By the way, Daniele Vella, Michael Mole, and Francesco Leone are the 3 drivers, which is a little bit less than some of those around them. There's some 5 driver lineups in this category, and notably the 37 rookie Monsters have got 5, so have some of those a little bit further down, like IDOS and AC. The other Team Rookie Monsters car. So they've got 10 drivers entered into this race, even though they've only got 2 cars, which is quite remarkable. So yeah, a few 5 driver teams, but you almost find yourself massively out of touch if you have too many drivers, because if you think about it, if everybody at the minimum is a 2-hour stint, and you're waiting for 4 drivers to get their 2-hour stints done with, then you can be waiting 8 hours to get back into the car. So I always think that 5 drivers, where you're going to be quite rested, I also think you're going to be a little bit out of touch with maybe the race and the conditions, and I think that it might be a little bit slower even sometimes.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic how that one works, because 3, I mean, obviously in real life they have 3 as a maximum as well. That is a little bit difficult, because you don't get enough time to have a proper rest, especially if you don't have an engineer with you who's sitting there with the drivers as well, because that means that one person's driving, one person's engineering, then you only have one other person who's able to get rest, and obviously then you only swap maybe every 2 or 3 hours, so you really don't get that much time. Whereas with 5 drivers, it's sort of, as you say, sort of the other extreme, where you end up waiting literally half a day to be able to get back in the car. So in terms of your rhythm as a driver, maybe you'll lose a little bit, but you will stay a lot more awake. You have a lot more time. You could literally have a proper sleep. You still get a good 6-7 hours sleep without interruption, which is crucial when you get to the early hours of the morning. So I wouldn't be surprised if drivers with 4 or 5, as you get to the early hours, start making less mistakes. That is a very good point to make out, actually. So those drivers with teams with more drivers will probably have a bit of advantage as we get to the second half of the race. Do expect those with maybe 3 drivers to struggle a little bit with fatigue later on.
I've seen as well people try and do this on 2, which is extremely difficult, especially if you're having to stay away. Surely you've got to have a strategist at some point, because that's a lot of driving to be doing, 12 hours in a 24-hour period, and obviously you've got to be awake a little bit before that as well, especially if you're starting the car. So yeah, that is a very long day out for those guys, but nobody is actually using 2 drivers here. I don't think that's even allowed, although saying that, I've just found a couple. Drillers and Pro Sim, oh no, that's 3 drivers, sorry, I couldn't count them. So yeah, it looks like that nobody has gone for 2 drivers, because I don't think it's allowed, quite frankly, and rightly so as well. That's almost a punishment to do it with 2 drivers. But yeah, as I think that we mostly agree on, there is 4 drivers is optimum, and that's what most of these drivers have actually got. Most of these teams have gone for as well. So like One Move, for example, Drive Seat Gaming are on 4 drivers as well. Satellite Racing, it's only really Musto and ProSim and Drillers who have really gone for 3, which may be a little bit short, but it could also be a disadvantage. And yet 3 is the minimum that's actually allowed here. So no 2 driver teams, probably on safety grounds, to be honest, because you don't want to be driving when you're that tired. That would be a danger to yourself and everybody else, really. So that is why there is a minimum of 3. But yeah, I just wonder how many guys are actually going to have a strategist here. If I look down I know it's not quite representative yet because we're still an hour and a bit away from the race, but looking down, there aren't all that many strategists hanging about. I can see a lot of drivers, but I can't see very many people who aren't actually drivers in the TeamSpeak channels. So maybe people aren't quite going for having strategists all the time, but it is certainly an advantage if one of these guys, or any of these guys really, do have a strategist, because as you say, you can rest up while you're not driving and not have to think about the strategy and different things like that.
Yeah, especially if you have someone who's not a driver helping you with that as well. Obviously, in some respects, the stints are long enough that you can sort of say, hey, do X amount of laps and I'll see you in half an hour. But you also don't want to leave someone just sitting there lapping, because it can get, especially when you get to a point where people are starting to go to sleep and all that, it can, mentally be quite difficult to keep your concentration going, keep your motivation, importantly, going. So those sorts of things are very important, and I wouldn't be surprised if maybe they're just not online yet, as you say, it's still an hour to go, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's quite a few drivers who teams who are starting to get drivers and engineers involved, because it can be quite important just to have someone to chat to on the straights, for instance. It can definitely help. So yeah, that is an advantage for the teams who do that. And especially as we get towards the early hours of the morning, you would definitely see certain teams making mistakes and certain teams not making mistakes.
Yeah, that will be a factor. Tiredness will come into play. Just going back to this LMP2 category for one brief moment as well before we take another commercial break here in a moment. We've only got one team on the same rig. It's ID SimSport, one of the championship contenders actually. And that's going to be an interesting story throughout the day because they don't look as fast as Team Rookie Monsters. So I think they're going to be safe in that respect. But One Move Esports definitely look faster than the 37 for the moment. It's going to be close between those two, but and the qualifying times, by the way, for those who don't actually represent too well, because the 37 didn't actually do the first session, so they got 15 minutes as their lap time for that one, which is obviously going to set them way back. One Move Esports setting off in 6th place in this race here today, just around about 1.4 seconds off on the average to Burst Edge Esports. So do One Move Esports, who are for a bit of an outside shot of this race win. They've got experience in this league, and they know what they're doing. Matthew de Crop, Roy de Munich, notably, as their best drivers. Have they got enough to overhaul Team Rookie Monsters in this race? The gap is 36 points they're going to have to take out. It's a big margin, so do they have enough?
I would say, obviously, with double points, that is possible mathematically. Is it possible realistically? I'm not sure, because one issue with One Move is they are, unfortunately, quite inconsistent when it comes to the longer races. So there's often crashes, there's often issues that happen, especially Matthew de Crop. He's disconnected from so many races. I ended up doing 3 seasons with him in the VEC and with that team in general, and the amount of times that they had DNFs when they could have won the race is incredible. I think higher than any other team that I've seen, but it's good that they keep coming back. But obviously they've been struggling a little bit with just the consistency of finishing the races, but they do have the speed. So if they can put it together and they can keep in the race, I would not be surprised seeing them on the podium. at the end of the 24 hours, but can they keep it? That is the real big question, and I don't really know the answer to that, because even in the first race of the season, back in, I believe it was March now, in the 12 Hours of Sebring, they were winning the GT3 category when they were, I believe, racing for ProSim in the GT3 category before they entered the LMP2. They were leading by so far, and then De Crop disconnected or had an issue, he DNF'd, and obviously then they didn't get the win there. So that's really the biggest sticking point for that team, but they do have the speed.
Yeah, they do, and they're going to have to finish at least second place if they want to actually take the race win. They need the Team Rookie Monsters car to not even complete the race, and if they finish second, then they will win the championship by one singular point, and that would be very exciting indeed. But they've got to get there first, and they've got to get to the end, as you say. I remember that Sebring race, the 12 Hours of Sebring, a long time ago. I think that was maybe even February, before the world fell apart. I think that Mathieu De Crop was insanely quick, but also had 2 disconnections in the space of an hour and lost a few laps, and then he brought it back again before more issues further down the line. But that was with the GT3 cars, I believe. This is with the LMP2s, and I don't think he's quite been as quick in the LMP2 as he was in the GT cars. We saw him a little bit earlier on, but that's the only French registered team in the race. By the way, we'll see how they get on. They're just ahead of HM Engineering and Fair Racing Team. But one final thing on LMP2 then, just before we go to a commercial break. Who is going to be a bit of, we know about Varga and Burst Edge Esports, but who is going to be a little bit of a surprise, maybe jumping up the order from further down to actually challenge for this race win, who we're maybe not expecting?
So looking at towards the second half of the field, obviously the 37 Ricky Monsters, you would expect them to be higher, but obviously they seemingly missed the first qualifying session, which is why they went a little bit further down. So we'll have to see if they can jump that back up.
Who are going to drive throughout
This in race control.
Please ensure you have your team number in front of your name. If you are driving from the same location and all team names are written into that is fine. Any teams who have not sent in their starting driver, please do so, or you will be put to the back of the field.
Yeah, so teams just being told there to get themselves ready. Obviously we're getting to that point now, hour to go before the start, so they need to get everything ready. But yeah, just to continue that point, I think the 37 Rookie Monsters, obviously missing that first qualifying session, they are probably going to be moving up. If you look at the pace that they actually did, they would be third on the grid, so they definitely have the pace to be towards the front here, but they've got quite a few cars to overtake. But I do believe they will be able to do that. Maybe someone can do a little bit of surprise like Fair Racing or HM Engineering, but it does seem they're a little bit off the pace, about a second and a half, or just a bit less than a second and a half in qualifying, so they're probably not quite as on the pace as our Rookie Monsters car. So I do believe as the qualifying sits, the top sort of 5-6 teams are really the ones we're going to be looking out for.
Yeah, that's what we're going to be seeing, and there's some great teams. We've talked about it all day. We're going to be talking about it for the next 25 hours as well. 1 hour to go then until we get this race underway, the final EEWC race of the season. But we're going to take a break now. When we come back, we'll be discussing the GTE category as we get ready for the start of the final round of GTR24's Endurance E-Racing World Championship. We'll be back in a minute.
The Endurance E-Racing World Championship Le Mans 24 Hours is brought to you by ESR Esports Network, Fleet Gaming, SimLab, Husingfeld, Simplexity, Acetech, and AMD Ryzen Radio.
you hate watching laggy streams of tournaments on 13-inch screens? Oh my god!
Of course you do. But you don't have to worry about that anymore.
He has a jump, son!
Complexity is a Danish designer and manufacturer of high-grade sim racing platforms. Their 3 different levels of platforms come in a variety of colors and configurations. Choose from the V4, built from 40 by 40mm extruded aluminium profiles, the V8 built from 80 by 40mm profiles, and the high-tier V12 built from 160 by 40mm extruded aluminium profiles. Prices range from 470 to 750 euros. Go to facebook.com/simplexity.eu and start a messenger chat to inquire more about the options for colors and customization.
I don't think they were capable of beating the GT3s. E, sorry. Oh. Welcome back to the GTR24H EEWC round 4 here from Le Mans. And now it's time, I think, that me, you and Illyria and Cam Roger alongside me going to go through the GTE categories. We've discussed LMP2 enough now. We're moving on to the GTE. So on pole position, Satellite Racing, the number 65, the American team that was qualified by Jimmy Nisula last night, 4 tenths quicker than the WOSR team, the number 51, Porsche, and then just behind them is the Juices Motorsport Club, which is going to be started by Wojtek Polesny. All 3 Porsches at the front of the field. Then it looks like that car is very strong indeed, and the Ferrari is maybe not quite as strong. I know those drivers didn't, or most of them anyway, didn't actually do night qualifying, so that's why they're starting in the 7th, 8th, 9th and 10th places in that GTE category. But the Porsche definitely looks like the car to have at this circuit.
It's quite interesting that I just realized, for instance, the Musto actually changed from the BMW, I believe they had earlier, to the Ferrari. But yeah, it certainly looked like the Porsche is the way to go. I mean, it was at the virtual Le Mans that obviously the official R-Factor Le Mans back in June. So obviously some teams using that to have a look at maybe what is the quicker car. And yeah, it seems like the Porsche is certainly the way to go. The nearest car is ID SimSport. Best part of 3 seconds off pole position, so maybe the Porsche is certainly the way to go, and the teams who have chosen that have worked it out. But I wouldn't be surprised if any of the other teams sort of come through a little bit. But it's certainly quite surprising actually how big some of these gaps are in the GTE field.
Yeah, they are pretty big indeed, and I wasn't quite expecting that, especially from teams like Simply Race, who are down in 5th place in that BMW. That car is going to be started by Matt Webb, and that was qualified by John Munro for actually getting a little bit slower throughout the day, but obviously night qualifying has meant that most of these drivers are going slower throughout the second part of qualifying than they did in the first, although Jimmy Nisula managed to actually improve his lap time by nearly half a second, even though that was in night time. I'm not entirely sure how he managed that, because it's a very good lap time from him there actually, and I wasn't quite expecting it from him. I have to say that I wasn't expecting Satellite Racing to be quite so quick in the qualifying session, but in the race they are a very consistent team, a very good team. I'm going to just reel off the drivers they've got in that car. So Tom Capusta, Liam Playfer, Liam Rance, and Jimmy Nisula, who qualified. I would say that Nisula is definitely the fastest driver of those, but they've definitely got a team to support him, that's for sure.
Yeah, they do. It's a pretty good lineup, and but that is quite an interesting point. If Nisula did those laps, we have to see how the other drivers paces, because on some cars that we've been talking about, we haven't actually mentioned this yet really, but the average pace for your team is very important. There's no point in having one driver who's like a second a lap quicker than everyone else. That's amazing, but they can't drive the whole race, obviously. So you also don't want to be ending up yo-yoing in the standings, where you have a couple of hours where you go up and then you put in a slow driver who loses you time, because that can get a bit awkward as well. So hopefully the drivers can keep up with that speed, because the times that they did in that Porsche GTE, really good for the number 65. So hopefully they can keep up with that pace, because that'd be quite a good result for them if they can.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll all find out over the course of the 24 hours. I'm not sure what the driving limit in terms of what these guys can actually do in terms of how long you can spend in the car. So I'll try and find that out, because I'm not entirely sure, I'm not 100% sure how long one is allowed to spend in the car. Hopefully Nick will be able to tell me about that, because he's normally up on this kind of information, or Peter, or anybody really who knows. Can tell me how long one can spend in the car, because obviously, as you say, you're only really as fast as your slowest driver, because you've all got to drive, and you've all got to, and there's a maximum that your fastest driver can do in terms of both physical ability, because obviously you can't really stay up driving at your best for 24 hours in a row, and of course in terms of actually complying with the rules as well. They've got 4 drivers to spread across the day though.
Yeah, one man who we've actually mentioned already, David Yunt, he is known for doing incredible stints. I remember there was one championship a couple of years ago, and I believe they only had like a minimum drive time of 1 hour or something along those lines. So in a 12-hour race, he did 11 hours and handed it to his teammate for 1 hour. So there are some people out there who want to do those crazy times and crazy stint lengths. But I would assume most drivers are going to be changing every 2, 3, maybe at a push 4 hours.
Yeah, that's really the limit that you do see. Although in the prototypes, I would expect maybe that even shorter than that. But in the GTE category, I think the strategy is a little bit easier to work out. Really, I've always found it a little bit easier anyway, because they basically bang on 1 hour here at Le Mans. It's a little, you consume fuel a little bit more than you would at other places, but it's basically bang on an hour, and I think that makes it much easier to actually figure out what's going on with the strategy. You just pit on every hour, and you keep doing that until you get to the end of the race, and it fits all nicely together. So I don't want to say that it's easy working out the strategy here, because there could always be some rain to throw you off and make you make an early pit stop or something like that, but the GTE and the GT3 categories are certainly a little bit easier than the prototypes, where they don't quite match up to an hour, and you're more likely to see late splashes and dashes by the prototypes than you are from the GTs.
Yeah, the LMP2 especially is pretty hilarious with the strategies, because let's just say a stint is like 37 minutes to be precise, then having to work out because obviously then the second stint will be like an hour and 14 minutes into the race. Yeah, things like that are quite interesting, so you have to be on top of it. I should say the GTE though is fairly quite normal, an hour or maybe just shy of an hour, but then obviously you then have a minute or two lost due to the pit stop as well, so it's generally roughly an hour exactly. So if you can actually save a lap in a GTE, that is very crucial, because obviously a lap here is best part of 4 minutes in a GTE car. So if you can save that amount of time, even a couple of stints during the race, that will push you a lot into your final pit stop, and then having a shorter final pit stop is often quite crucial.
Yeah, how well do you know your 37 times table? That's that's not an easy one to be working out, really. And that's why if I was driving, if I was strategizing, so if I was a strategist, I would definitely prefer to be doing it for the GTs than the prototypes. But just looking at some of these starting drivers who we're starting to get a bit of a read on, really. There's still 45 minutes to go roughly until we'll be handing over to Yusuf and Alex to take you through the first few hours of the race. But we're starting to get now some teams confirm who they're going to be their starting drivers. So Jimmy Nisula, the qualifier for Satellite Racing, is going to start from the pole. We don't know the WOSR Zone Performance starting driver yet, but we do know Wojtek Polesny will be starting the Juices Motorsport Club. So they're two very fast drivers, and I think that Juices have got a great shot at this throughout the race. They're a very experienced team. They've won in VEC millions of times, by the way. They've got the most individual race wins of any team in VEC's history, which is quite a lot of wins and championship wins at that. But they've really come to the fore. I feel like they dipped a few years ago in their kind of performance and their stature, but they've really come back to the fore again. They're one of the best teams, and it's going to be very interesting to see in these early hours. Nisula versus Polesny, two very, very good drivers in the first hours of this race.
Yeah, that Juices Motorsport Club Porsche is looking very good with their driver lineup as well. They got Wojtek Polesny, as you say, starting, but then they've also got João Balboa, Adam Baldwin and Michael Sedlacek as well. So those are very good drivers and also experienced in this Porsche, because I believe they've used the Porsche ever since it got released a couple of years ago now. So even with the BOP changing a few times and that sort of stuff, they've stuck with that Porsche. They know it so well, and I think that's really an advantage when it comes to basically just knowledge and experience. You know exactly what the cars go to. They should know the strategy off by heart now. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're actually coming up from that third position and challenging, because in reality they weren't too far off pole position either, just shy of just over half a second. So in the grand scheme of things, not looking too bad for them, I'd say, as we head towards the race in a few moments time as well. So yeah, I would say they, despite being in third, are probably ones to look out for the race win as well.
Yeah, you're right. I've never seen them not in a Porsche, to be honest. They've pretty much never not used it. And that today is no exception, of course. They qualified just 5 tenths away from Nisula. Now, speaking about this championship, we touched on it a little bit earlier on, but Simply Race are going to be starting the race from 5th place, and Musto GD Esports are going to be starting from 8th place in this order. If you finish the race in this season, or in this final round of the season, then you will be scoring points, and obviously you get the bonus point as well for completing the race. And it seems that maybe even if you don't, I'm not sure what the rules are, whether you have to actually finish the race or not to get the points, or how much of the race you have to complete to get the points, but you definitely do get an extra point for completing the race. What's the gap in the championship at the moment? I should be able to remember this, but I've forgotten already. It is 7 points between the two of them, so very, very close. At the moment, Simply Race will be picking up 20 points if the race were to end off the start, and Musto only 8, so that would actually overhaul it, and Simply Race would win by just 5 points. So it's definitely on between those two, although I think that Musto might just be the faster team. They'll have David Greco starting their car.
But as you mentioned, they're starting towards the back anyway, because due to missing the second qualifying session. So they've got to do quite a bit of overtaking, and they've got to do a lot of overtaking if they want to get into the high point scoring. But I believe the rule about finishing is literally just finishing. So even if you're a million laps down, I believe just getting to the actual checkered flag is how you get that. So we'll have to see if anyone who's having a bad race maybe tries to come back for the extra point. We'll see. But that also could be in terms of the actual championship battle between drivers, it's not really going to affect, because if you're going to be gaining points to someone, you have to finish the race anyway. and obviously with double points, a singular point is not always the most significant. So I have to see obviously how that one works out, but I would assume it's not going to be too big a factor between the teams fighting directly between each other. But that's a lot of work for David Greco and the boys there in the number 53 to try and get up, because I just want to count. I believe it's eighth place that they're in. So that's a lot of cars they got to overtake.
Yeah, it is. Even to get up to Simply Race, there is a couple of cars separating the two of them. I'm sure we're going to see those two teams fight it out, though. Very excited to see what's going to transpire between those guys throughout this race. But yeah, a number of good teams around here at the moment. David Greco qualified that car. He's going to be starting the car and definitely outlined. When I spoke to him ahead of the Matsusaka race, actually, he definitely outlined Simply Race as the biggest rivals in this championship. I think that's clear for everybody to see right now. I don't think anybody else is nobody else is actually mathematically in contention for this anymore, or nobody is who is actually here on the grid right now. So yeah, it's between those two, Musto versus Simply Race. Two fantastic teams. We've seen a lot of those two teams over the last few months here at GTR24. It's been great to see those guys fighting it out in the sprint series. Musto have just about had the edge on that one. Now they're fighting it out in the endurance series, and I'm pretty sure as well that those guys are coming back next year to do some more and go to do battle once again, because next year's lineup is already looking fairly good. But one final word on GTE. I guess I'm surprised a little bit to see a couple of guys down the order. We mentioned the Ferraris with all down the order, but that was mainly because none of the Ferraris did night practice. Ground Effect DGTL are also down there with Musto GD Esports, and that was a little bit surprised, I have to say, to see those two teams down there. DGTL have won the overall here at the LAN event in GTR24 a total of 3 times, which is more than anybody else because they're the only repeat winners of this actual event. So to see them down in 9th is a pretty big surprise, to be honest. And Ground Effect Sim Racing team are also out of position. So what can we expect from those guys throughout the race? I think that personally they can get up the order and get a top 5 quite comfortably, but they're going to have also a lot of overtaking to do, along with some other guys they're back down there with.
Yeah, especially Ground Effect starting from complete last position in class. That is going to be a huge task. But I should say DGTL have a lot of experience with Le Mans, so they should know pretty much where the track goes by now, obviously after getting a few wins to their name as well. So I would expect, we'll just need to see how they go. If you look at just their first qualifying session times, Musto would have been about 4th, DGTL would have been about 5th, so they definitely have the pace to be at the front, and I would expect them to come through, because especially the cars who are just ahead of them, they are a little bit quicker than just on quali pace, so I would expect that to translate to race pace. So do not be surprised by these guys coming up, and I would expect especially the Musto car, but also less so DGTL and even Ground Effect, I do expect them to be coming up, and this GTE battle is probably going to be one of the best ones to watch, purely because of how the grid is a little bit mixed up compared to what we were expecting. So yeah, I think GTE is going to be one of the top categories to watch during this 24 hours.
Yeah, especially towards the start, where those guys who are in the Ferraris in particular are going to be making their way through the field. All right, I think we've touched on the team of, or the class, sorry, of GTE enough now, because yeah, there's 10 cars in that category, and yeah, other than that, I don't think there's anything else to really speak of for them. I did make a note in practice, by the way. I wrote down Ground Effect GTE sandbagging question mark. I thought they were maybe being a little bit slower than what, just a little bit slower than what they were letting on. That's either they were just getting accustomed to the Le Mans circuit, or they were actually sandbagging and not letting on quite how much pace they had. But in the first part qualifying, they did a 3 minutes 52.1, which is unfortunately for them not quite as quick as all of the other drivers, and they didn't do the other qualifying session at night either. Don Hutt is going to be starting that car, and then alongside him, as I try and find their team, here it is, the only Chilean registered team. Rick Van Earl is partnering him along with Mike Conger, John Paul Van Earl, and Jos Araneda. That's a surprisingly strong team. So maybe they were sandbagging it a little bit. Maybe they're dark horses for this race, although they are starting 10th.
Yeah, they got some work to do, but I think they can definitely get up the field a little bit. They got a couple of good, experienced, quick drivers in there as well, and I've actually sort of been a part of their team a little bit over the last few months for other competitions, but they work so hard, ground effects. They put in so much effort behind the scenes, and Jose, the team manager there, has it set up really well. They've got a really structured plan with their testing, with who does what, who has what responsibilities. So yeah, I would expect them to be pretty sorted when it comes to the strategy as well. So I think they're definitely going to jump up the field here.
Yeah, definitely qualifying out of position. So let's move on then to GT3, as we're currently 35 minutes away from the start of the final EEWC race of the season here at Le Mans. In GT3, it is Boya Milan who qualified on the pole position by a country mile ahead of the rest of the field. Musto GD Esports in second place, and a good, apparently, 4 seconds behind. Now, I've got a bit of a question mark over this, because as far as I could see in the qualifying session, they out-qualified Primavera, who was in the Musto kart, by 2.5 seconds in the first session, and they did a 49.8 is what I can see from the stream anyway, and apparently they've got a 45.8 on the spreadsheet here. So I will just have a question mark hovering over whether that is right or not, but we'll find out a little bit later on. Maybe it is right, and I'm just kind of tricking myself, but it would seem a little bit strange because they'll be 7 seconds quicker than the actual field, which is not true probably, and they would have out-qualified the whole GTE field by more than 3 seconds, so it's probably not correct, to be honest, but we'll gloss over that. Either way, even if that is incorrect, they would still easily qualify on pole. Monaco, probably the pick of the bunch here, you have to say, that they've got Musto challenging them. They have got a very strong team here. Boya Milan is a very, very good GT3 driver.
Yeah, as you say, even with the time there, they would easily be on pole. They're looking good. Borja Milan starts their car, as you say. He and to be honest, all of the drivers in that car are really, really good and experienced. In this number 77, they've got Nico Barkley, Borja Milan, Chris Shepherd, and Ricardo Costa. So that is such a stacked lineup, and I would not be surprised if they go and walk the GT3 category purely in terms of pace. Obviously, as we mentioned previously, it is a 24-hour race. You do have to get it to the end, but they're looking very good. They're very experienced in that McLaren 720S as well, so they know the car. They've got a good lineup, and I think they are going to be looking very good indeed. But we cannot count out people such as Musto. Obviously, this is a slightly arguably lesser Musto car than the number 53 in the GTE category. We've got in the number 97, we've got Daniele Primavera, Fabio Liuzzi, Giuliello Acipinti, and Matteo Brachetti as well. So they've got maybe not quite as strong a lineup as their GTE counterpart, but obviously getting second on the grid, looking pretty good on pace as well. But we cannot discount DISSR Lab, the number 45 car, leading the championship by some 26 points there in third place. So they are going to be trying to hold on to that. Obviously, 26 points is a really good margin. So if they can get a podium, or even maybe a top 4 as well, because obviously the car behind them is a 999 Rookie Monsters, who are second in the championship, is really between those two cars. If they can sort of keep ahead, keep next to them, I think they're going to be looking good for the championship as well. So there's potentially 2 little battles there that we need to look out for. Maybe Wanako versus Musto, and then just behind them, the DISSR Lab car versus Team Rookie Monsters.
Yeah, it definitely looks that way. And there's some drivers and teams in behind as well who aren't all that far away. DSR Nightmare, Glam Racing, DSR Dream Team, both are all there really, along as well with one more team, B32 Racing, who might challenge in this race as well. So yeah, it's a strong GT3 lineup, but definitely the pick of the bunch has to be Wanako, you'd have to say, with Mustang. I'm glad you said Ochi Pinty's name before me, because that is a difficult name to say, but I'd have to say that Daniele Primavera, probably the fastest driver of that squad. I can't say I've ever heard of any of the other drivers in that car. Maybe they're inexperienced at this level. I'm not entirely sure what the deal is with that one, but we're just going to have to find out. Just one of those where you have to look at them and find out as the race goes on. We're going to learn a lot about them throughout the race, I'm pretty sure, but yeah, as you say, pick of the bunch, definitely the Wanako team. Nico Barkley, Boya Milan, Chris Shepherd, Ricardo Costa, a really good team, and they've qualified on pole quite comfortably in this one, ahead of Musto ED Esports. You mentioned the championship there as well. The number 45 DSR Lab leads it with 80 points, having taken all 3 race victories so far this season and 2 of the pole positions. Only time they didn't manage that was at Sebring, but they did win the race in a great battle towards the end, actually, with ProSim in the final hour. So they come in with a 26-point lead over Team Rookie Monsters, who are right behind them. That is going to be a battle to watch throughout the day. But teams that can also win it: B32 Racing, DSR Nightmare, I have to believe it is, or DSR Dream Team, forgot which one it is. It's Nightmare, the 777 team, and the Sim Racing Motorsport team can also win it from here. They're 49 points back and need a bit of a modern miracle for them to actually take the victory in this one. But it is very open. I'd say probably the most open of the categories in this series in terms of the championship. There's definitely the most cars can actually win it. I'd say that GTE is more likely to come down to the closer margin of the 3 that are still in play, but GT3 still has a lot of ways this can still go.
Yeah, it certainly does, and that 777 DSR Nightmare car, one thing they have as their advantage, it might not be apparent just yet, but they are in that Callaway Corvette, and the whole time through the season, in the first 2 races specifically that I commentated in, Sebring and the Nürburgring, 12 hours, I was always saying, the Corvette's a little bit down on the BOP, this sort of stuff, but now there's a new BOP a few weeks ago. And the Corvette is not necessarily the quickest, it's pretty quick in qualifying, but it's not necessarily the quickest overall, but it's a lot easier to drive and it has a lot less tyre wear than the other cars. So when we get to Le Mans, obviously what you see a lot of teams end up doing is maybe even double or triple stinting tyres, and if they can do something like that with strategy, I would not be surprised to see that Corvette move up, because it is now a very good car in terms of the overall way that it drives, not just in terms of the speed, but in terms of the strategy that it has as well. So if they get that right, they could be looking at potentially getting up onto that podium if they keep it clean as well.
I'd love to see the Corvette get up there, actually. It's not a car that's used all that often, either in real life or in R-Factor 2, so I'd love to see it get up there. Well, we're just under half an hour now before the start of this race, so we're going to take a little commercial break here, and then finally we will get the final part of this build-up underway, and finally for these drivers and us at home as well, we can get this race underway. You're watching the GTR24H final round of the EEWC at Le Mans. We'll be back in a few moments' time with the final part of build-up.
The Endurance E-Racing World Championship Le Mans 24 Hours is brought to you by ESR Esports Network, Fleet Gaming, SimLab, Husingfeld, Simplexity, Acetic, and AMD Ryzen Radio.
Simplexity is a Danish designer and manufacturer of high-grade sim racing platforms. There are 3 different levels of platforms come in a variety of colors and configurations. Choose from the V4, built from 40 by 40 mm extruded aluminium profiles, the V8 built from 80 by 40 mm profiles, and the high-tier V12 built from 160 by 40 mm extruded aluminium profiles. Prices range from 470 to 750 euros. Go to facebook.com/simplexity.eu and start a messenger chat to inquire more about the options for colors and customization.
Games? Do you like esports? Do you hate watching laggy streams of tournaments on 13-inch screens? Oh my god!
Of course you do. But you don't have to worry about that anymore.
He has a jump, son!
Welcome back to the final part of build-up here for the final race in the EEWC in 2020. Yeah, welcome along everybody. It's not long now until we get the race underway at Le Mans. 24 hours of racing, of course, and it's all kicking off at 12 midday. I'm not sure if it's AM or PM, but whatever it is. Midday in Europe and 11 AM in the UK. We've got the final 20 minutes or so of build-up where we'll be talking about the race and what we expect to come from it. I'd like to hear your thoughts here, Cal, on the strategy that these guys are going to really employ, because I don't really know what these guys are going to do, to be honest, in terms of the strategy they're going to go for. Is it, in terms of tyres I'm talking here, of course, obviously at every fuel stop you're going to be making a full tank of fuel and sending your car back out again, but how often are these guys going to change tyres? I guess it depends on the category of car they're actually driving in, I suppose.
Yeah, so each category is a little bit different. So the main thing with the so we'll go from top to bottom. So the Hypercar, the Le Mans Hypercar, McLaren Senna, it's got a huge fuel tank, and even on road courses you can get well over an hour, maybe even an hour and 15, hour and 20 minutes if you're saving. At Le Mans, with just the type of track it is, you do generally just get an hour out of the fuel stints, but what you do with the tyres is pretty much change every stint. So you're rerunning the soft tyres, and you'll be trying not to change tyres because obviously you are a lot quicker with the new tyres, and it's not quicker to maybe use a slower tyre and then not save a pit stop. You're pretty much going on softs and pushing all the time. Whereas in the LMP2 category, you are, especially with the stints being pretty much half the length of the Senna, you can end up double stinting tyres, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot of teams trying to do that, because if you save a little bit of time, and because the stints are so much shorter, you don't then have such a long time of losing that time of being the slower tyres, because obviously it's a lot less laps. Whereas in the Senna, you then have to do like a whole another hour of being on slow tyres, so you end up losing a lot of time. So those are sort of a little bit different, and that's why even though the P2s aren't too much slower, they end up losing a lot of time purely because they make pretty much twice the amount of pit stops during the race. And then as you go to the GTEs, this, as you said, is pretty much an hour stint with the GTEs. I would be surprised if teams are double stinting in the GTEs as well, from what I remember. A lot, again, it's just not necessarily quicker to be able to do that with also how the tires work. You want to be having all the grip that you can, so I wouldn't be surprised if we see pretty much 24 sprint races with the GTE category. However, when you get to the GT3s, this is when some people try some crazy stuff, which is quite, I guess, quite nice to see. And also the GT3s, in the latest update to the car a couple of weeks ago, have now been given fuel mixtures. So they are able to now save fuel, because before it was just one mixture for each car. Now they have fuel mixtures. So they have, I believe, 4, and obviously 4 is the highest, the qualification mix, then 3 is like a fast race, 2 is a slow race, and then 1 is like a safety car, or caution code 80 fuel mixture. So that is potential to save maybe a lap of fuel here or there, which could be quite interesting. But with the GT3s, even with the soft tyres, I would not be surprised if you see 1 or 2 teams try and triple stint tyres. Double, yes, but we've seen triple stinting at Le Mans in the GT3s as well, so I would not be surprised seeing anyone do that. Obviously, it is the the so-called rookie category, so maybe certain teams don't want to try that craziness, and obviously you have to be consistent. Once the tires start wearing, it becomes harder to drive, so you need to remain consistent, because it's not just the potential lap times you need to look at, it's the ones you're actually doing. So it doesn't matter if you're able to be, let's say, within a second of your best on new tires. If you're making mistakes, you're losing 2 seconds a lap, obviously it's not going to be worth it. So yeah, each category is a little bit different, and that's just something that we'll have to try and keep up with during the race, and how those strategies work out. We'll try and keep up who's not changing tires. But yeah, that's all just a rough idea. Obviously, it gets an even different story when we get to wet racing as well. But for the dry, that's pretty much what you're looking at.
Yeah, that is going to be an important factor, and we'll talk about that in a few moments' time. But try telling that GT3 is a rookie category to Monaco at the moment. They're currently one of the best teams at the moment. We'll see actually in practice, where are they lapping at the moment. Of course, they are at the front, Boya Milan, with a 3 minutes 55.5 at the moment, ahead of the Nightmare team by 1 second. So it seems on race pace, things are a lot closer than they were on qualifying pace, and we are glad to see that. You mentioned fuel mixes and fuel saving. It's a little bit more difficult here at Le Mans though, because you've got nearly a 4-minute lap here in GTE and GT3. That's a lot of fuel saving to be making. It's a lot more difficult to save a lap here than it is in other places.
Yeah, it certainly is. It's about 3 times longer than your average track in terms of length. So yeah, it's not the easiest. However, there is a lot of straight lines. So if you are battling for position and you're similar speed, if not a little bit quicker than the car ahead, you can sit there in the slipstream and save. And especially, all of the cars now have the fuel mixtures from Hypercar P2, GT, and now GT3s as well. So all of them now have that ability. I wouldn't expect teams to do anything apart from drive on mixed floor the whole time, because this is a sort of track where you just kind of push. Because as you say, saving is quite difficult, because you end up, especially if you save with fuel mixtures, you lose so much time down the straights. I mean, here, there's, I think, it's 6 straights total, and obviously a couple of other sections that are not really straight, but there's about 6 nominated straights on this track. So if you start literally giving yourself less power, of course you're going to be slower. So a lot of the saving you'll see would be lifted and coast into the braking zones.
Yeah, it's all about that balance really between making the fuel go as long as you need it to and having the pace, because it's all well and good saving 3 laps of fuel a stint, but you're going to be really slow, and that's not going to help you in any way, even though you've done less pit stops than everybody else. So it's all about finding that balance, and finding a balance in your setup as well, because we have seen rumours of rain in the air here at Le Mans. I don't know if we're able to get our little weather forecast up to date. It's actually on my particular forecast forecast at the moment, saying that it's supposed to be raining right now, and that's definitely is not the case. It is actually just overcast rather than actually raining at all. You can see the red dot where the Circuit de la Sarthe is at the moment. But the first sprinkling of rain I'm maybe expecting at 4 o'clock local time, and then that's going to last for about 4 hours, but that's very light rain. The real rain is going to hit at 5 a.m, which is possibly the worst time to hit. The forecast I'm seeing at the moment anyway is saying that the real heavy rain is going to hit at 5 a.m. That is a real tough one. You know, you think you're getting to near the end of the race, and then all of a sudden it starts, and maybe even 4 a.m. actually thinking about it, you think you're getting to the end and then it's dark, and then it starts heavily raining. You're really tired, and there could be a lot of mistakes in that period because of the ensuing rain.
And the okay, so for the spectators, you can actually go onto the website, and you'll be able to find. So if you go to the website itself, so GTR24H.org/weather, you'll be able to get it up. So you'll be able to have a look and have a see how it's coming through. Obviously, at the moment, as you say, there's only sort of little clouds, but as you say, 5 a.m. is the worst time. You just potentially had a bit of a sleep maybe, or you just done the night stint, and you're really tired by this point because obviously you've been up all night, and then the rain hits. And this is where it becomes quite tricky for these drivers and teams to know what to do with their strategies even. The main thing that is really a big factor is the rear wing, because that's the only thing that you can change during the race, because obviously you can't go in and change setup or anything like that. The only thing you can do is change that rear wing, so a lot of teams will be bumping that up in the pit stops. But it's also about how you drive, because one of the main things, especially with the McLaren Senna, is the wet tyres. They're so difficult to heat up, and they are only quicker when the track is absolutely saturated. So you then generally have to drive on the intermediates, because the wets are so difficult to drive because they just don't heat up. But then driving on inters, on the dries even, the dries in the sort of mixed conditions is so dangerous, because if you go just one tyre width off the racing line, that's where it's even wetter, and then you potentially can't brake, or you understeer off a corner, and that's a completely different type of driving. And by that point, it's not about it doesn't matter what car you're in, what class you're in, it's literally about who can keep it on the track and going in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's exactly what happened last year as well. When the rain hit, there were a lot of incidents in a very short period of time. Obviously, I wasn't there, and I wasn't watching either. But you will have been there, Cam. What was it like when the rain did hit last year?
It was quite funny actually. It was mid of the night. It was like 1-2 o'clock in the morning, and myself and Peter Schultz, teammate who's now racing for IDOS this year, we're in the comms booth. We were just having a chat with Lewis and can't remember someone else who was in the commentary booth. I think it was Ossian. We were just having a chat at the time, and Alistair was driving, and we were just saying, oh yeah, as soon as it starts raining, we'll get Pepe in the car because he's a wet master. And as soon as we said that, it just started raining, and Peter, he sprinted off the stage to go back to the team tent to obviously speak to Alistair, who was driving, and it chucked it down for quite a few hours actually. And that's really where we saw who was better in the hypercar, because I think it was the Singularity car Jordi Sveers was driving at the time. He went onto the wet tyres, and as I mentioned, the wet tyres just really don't work in that hypercar. So the teams who stayed out on the dry tyres for longer were actually still being quicker despite the rain coming down, because they could keep the temperature and keep the grip in those dry tyres. And as we go to the LMP2 category, as we saw in the first round of the VEC a couple of weeks ago, it was a fully wet race at Silverstone. Some of those LMP2 teams did 4 or 5 stints on a wet set of tyres. So I would expect some teams to learn from that, because obviously some teams here also drive in that series, or maybe watched it and saw. So that's LMP2 is quite crazy. When you get to the wet, you will be seeing teams doing a lot of stints, especially at this track where there's a lot of straight lines as well. I'm sure you're going to see quite a few crazy strategies.
Yeah, and that's the great thing I think about running this race in October. We have increased. I think it's the track temperature that's been increased by 10 degrees Celsius, just to make it a little bit more like it would be at Le Mans. So whatever the track temperature is, it's increased by 10 degrees just to make things a little bit easier on everybody, and that will help out just a little bit. But the weather is still very autumnal, and we are in late October at the moment, heading very quickly towards winter, and that inevitably means more rain, especially in northern France where it does rain quite a lot, and it will do in Le Mans as well. I'm sure, as Alex was saying earlier on, the weather forecast actually when we started broadcasting on Thursday was a lot worse than it is now. It was pretty much going to rain for the whole time as it stood then. Now it's got to about less than half the race. Actually, it's a lot better than it was a few days ago, but we were saying with Alex and Yusuf on Thursday when there was official practice that rain was a certainty at that point. I think it still is certain that it is going to hit at some point, but it looks like we're going to be waiting a lot longer than normal for a little bit of rain. We might get a little bit of sprinkling as the sun goes down tonight, but through the middle of the night, the rain looks like it is really going to roll in, and that will be advantage or disadvantage drivers according, really. And I'm sure that people will be more comfortable in the wet weather conditions than others. That is a thing that you have to consider, really. But you might not always have that luxury. When you're in all in the same location, you can be a little bit. I feel like you can be a little bit more flexible with who you're driving, because you can just wake someone up, really, if you need them in the car. But you can't really do that when you're doing this remotely, as most of these teams are. I'd say more than half are actually doing this remotely, so you can't quite be as flexible. You can't say, oh, can you jump in a little bit earlier, because they might be asleep or elsewhere. So I feel like being apart makes it a little bit more difficult to actually figure out who should be in the car when the rain comes.
Yeah, everything has its pros and its cons, and that is certainly a con of it not being a LAN event, because, as you say, if someone goes to sleep, even if it's just for a couple of hours to have a nap, even if they keep their phone on or whatever, you still don't really have the ability to contact them very easily. Whereas, as you say, if you just go up to the sleeping room in a LAN event, you can easily just sprint up there and grab someone or whatever. So it is a little bit... Yeah, it is a little bit different, and teams will have to factor that in to when they're putting their drivers in, and that is probably the most crucial part of the race. Obviously, apart from the obvious of keeping it on the track and getting a good strategy, having your drivers sorted is so important, especially when you get to the night stints. You need to keep everyone fresh, you need to keep everyone rested, and have a proper structure, because as soon as anything happens and you have to react quickly, you need to have a plan of what to do.
Yeah, so we just got news in, by the way, from the One Move Camp, the only French-registered team on the grid here for the 24 hours here today. Roy de Munich was supposed to be starting the car, but he slept in again, like he did at the Nürburgring 12 hours. If you remember, about 6 months, well, maybe a little bit less than 6 months ago, maybe 4 months ago now, he slept in for that race, and so that car didn't actually start because there was nobody there to actually start the car, and that might have cost them a shot at this championship all in all. And we'll talk about that throughout the day, but Mathieu de Crop is now starting the car because Roy de Munich has slept in again, and that's also something that wouldn't have happened at a LAN event, because as we say, you can just wake someone up, but Roy de Munich is going to be getting in that car a little bit later on now.
And also, when it is the LAN event, obviously you're kind of there for a purpose. You travelled all that way. That's the only thing you're sort of focusing on, so you're going to be getting up, setting your alarm in the morning and trying to get to the venue at the correct time to be all ready for the race, and obviously the briefing that comes before that. So it is a little bit different. Teams will have to plan that the best they can, and obviously, unfortunately, One Move there have not.
Fortunately, though, they have planned ahead a little bit, learnt from the mistakes they made at the Nürburgring race, and they have got another driver on standby. So Mathieu de Crop will be starting that car, and he is a very capable driver. He might be able to make up a few places in the early going as well here, starting from 6th place, I believe, in the One Move car. We'll see how he gets on, despite being called up a little bit late. But let's see now, as we get towards the final few moments, under 10 minutes to go before we start this race. I'll ask for a prediction from you, Cam. Yeah, we haven't really got time to have a prediction for all 4 categories. We have talked about them all, though. Who would be your pick for the overall victory, though, before we sign off here?
Ooh, overall victory. So obviously we're pretty much then looking at the hypercars, because as I mentioned, the LMP2's pretty difficult with the amount of pit stops, even if there is any sort of rain or anything to help them in terms of the lap speed. So looking at the hypercars, it's really going to be a battle between Seawolf and PinSim's Drillers Esport, the number 10 Drillers and the number 47 Seawolf car. I believe it's really going to be between those two. They did have a decent margin in that qualifying session, and I do think, especially from the experience of those two teams, that they will be able to carry that through to the race. So who is it going to be? Well, on pure speed, if there is a clean race, that things sort of go quite correct, I do think Drillers will win. But as you mentioned, Drillers have had the tendency to make mistakes, so I wouldn't be surprised if you see Seawolf doing a cheeky victory. So I'm going to say, over the course of 24 hours, Seawolf. That is my prediction.
Expecting a bit of a mix-up for Drillers. Well, I would actually go for... I would say that the Seawolf maybe have a chance of making a few mistakes. Obviously, all of them have a chance of making mistakes, but I think the experience that Viaduct and E-Team Brit have got in this championship already, I know that E-Team Brit haven't actually participated in any of the races so far, I do believe. Yeah, that is correct. They've been signed up for all of them, but they've now decided for Le Mans that they are going to race, and they've got some not bad drivers there. I know some that even you've raced against in real life, Cam, like Trundley, who's going to be starting that car. Yeah, so I think that one of those two are a pick. I would go for Viaductin, though, for pure no other reason than they've got experience in this championship, and they've got experience this season, even though if they may not be the fastest team possible. But as we edge closer towards the start here for the final EEWC race of the season, the 24-hour race here at Le Mans, we are going to take one final commercial break, and then we'll be getting this race underway here in a moment. You'll be joined by Yusuf Bin Zahel and Alex Skinner to take you through the first few hours of the race. Me and Cam will be back a little bit later on. For now, we are signing off, and you're going to take another commercial break, and when we come back, we'll be ready to begin here at Le Mans.
The Endurance E-Racing World Championship Le Mans 24 Hours is brought to you by ESR Esports Network, Leap Gaming, SimLab, Fusingfeld, Simplexity, Asta, and AMD Ryzen Radio.
Simplexity is a Danish designer and manufacturer of high-grade sim racing platforms. Their 3 different levels of platforms come in a variety of colors and configurations. Choose from the V4, built from 40 by 40mm extruded aluminium profiles, the V8 built from 80 by 40mm profiles, and the high-tier V12 built from 160 by 40mm extruded aluminium profiles. Prices range from 470 to 750 euros. Go to facebook.com/simplexity.eu and start a messenger chat to inquire more about the options for colors and customization.
Do you like games? Do you like esports? Do you hate watching laggy streams of tournaments on 13-inch screens? Oh my god!
Of course you do. But you don't have to worry about that anymore.
He has a jump, son!
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the GTR24H round 4 of the championship here for the Endurance E-Racing World Championship. Round 4 at Le Mans, and we have 1 hour left of our practice before we get things underway with the start of the 24 hours, and it is going to be a thrilling start, that is for sure. Of course, we have already had qualifying happen, and we're just kind of chilling, we're vibing, we're just anticipating what could potentially be coming later on today. And right now, to be honest, we're just seeing teams just really do race strategies at the moment, seeing what kind of times they can pull out. There is no real need to push to show those qualifying times because qualifying is done and dusted. So one of the most impressive things that I'm finding right now is the fastest lap that Viaductin have put out in that Senna Hypercar class, because that's a 3:22.4, which is practically the same as the lap time they did in qualifying. So it's a very quick time, and if Team Viaductin can consistently find that pace, they're going to be in a very good position come the race. And this is something that we have talked about consistently over the broadcast these last couple of days, is the qualifying pace versus the race pace. Qualifying will get you a couple of positions higher up the field, but it doesn't do anything for you over 24 hours. That's all race pace. And being able to convert that quality pace into race pace, just how consistently can you put out those laps? How consistently can you not make mistakes and just continue to find time? Also looking down at the LMP2 class, it is actually Ernest Lappins who is lapping the quickest with a 3:26.7. And of course, I think the fastest times we were seeing from the LMP2 class were 3:25. So it does seem that maybe a few guys have gone out there and put in some push laps at the end of their stint. Maybe if they just realize that they can't quite pull out 11 laps, but they can do 10 laps. Then on that last lap, just use up the remaining fuel and really hit home a couple of punchy laps. And we are going to be seeing some undercut strategies come through, maybe some overcuts, who knows. And you know, we've talked about it time and time again, how here at Le Mans you have a 3-minute plus lap time. I mean, if you look down to your GT cars, especially the GT3 cars, you're talking almost a 4-minute lap time. If you make a slight miscalculation on fuel, one extra lap to do or one less lap that you are able to do is so huge when you compare it to the likes of Matsusaka, when you compare it to the Nürburgring GP circuit and Sebring. Instead of, you know, having to pit 1 minute 30 early, you're having to pit 3.5 minutes earlier, which is a huge amount of time. Because, you know, you talk about this over an hour, that's 2-3 minutes, which is 6 minutes of time that, you know, you have to pit earlier, and you can end up losing about 2, maybe 3 minutes over an entire stint just by not being able to carry that fuel one extra lap. So it is something that has to be watched out for when we do get into the race. We're not entirely sure what the stint lengths are for each of the classes. I believe our best idea is on that LMP2 class, where we're expecting 10 laps to be the stint length, and maybe 11 if teams can really push that fuel and really save going into the Mulsanne chicanes, because that's the biggest fuel saving point. Just lifting off super early on the Mulsanne straight and just letting it coast into the chicanes. Another big area that you can really do it is down into Indianapolis and the Porsche curves. Into Indianapolis, that right-hander, it's fast, but you can lift off so early and then just let it roll all the way through the right-left. And then, of course, into the Porsche curves. When you're going in, you just let it roll through. Just give a little bit of a throttle so that you never have to brake through the Porsche curves, and you can save a whole bunch of fuel. As a result, it will cost you a good 2-3 seconds over a lap, maybe more. But at the end of the day, it gets you across the line, and it means you can do those extra 1-2 laps, which is enough to save you that time, is enough to, you know, jump you ahead by a position or two. So it's going to be so critical. And for those people who have good memories and remember back to Matsusaka, in the GT3 class, the DIS, SR Lab and Team Rookie Monsters, they were having a bit of a battle after DIS had some unfortunate issues that occurred to them, and they were coming back. They were hunting down Team Rookie Monsters, and Team Rookie Monsters, they pitted 1 lap too late, and as a result, when they pitted, they came out about half a tenth behind DIS, and it was Andy Kurtzen who was throwing in some almighty laps. But you have to get that strategy right, and here at Le Mans, if you misjudge your strategy by 1 lap, this isn't a 1.5 minute lap time that, you know, your opposition will be able to pull off an undercut or an overcut. It's a 3.5 minute lap, and I just can't stress enough, this is a long track. Pit strategy is so vital, whether it's saving fuel, whether it's making an undercut, overcut strategy work for track position. And you have to remember, drivers aren't really going to be battling with each other until you get into those last few hours. Before that point, everyone's on their own race. They know their strategies. They don't know what other people are doing, whether they're looking to double stint, and by double stint we mean you pit, but you don't switch tires. And you can do that if your tires do have, you know, the durability and they aren't wearing out. Then you just stay out. You know, you change fuel, but you don't need to change tires, and you just go back out, because when you do change tires, it just takes a little bit extra in the pits, and sometimes the amount of time lost in the pits is not really gained by gaining that fresh rubber. So yeah, there's so much stuff that, you know, you have to consider, and the strategists will be, well, I can tell you right now, they're going to be frantically going through different strategies, what to do if, in any circumstance, if they have an accident, if something throws them onto a different strategy, how do they react? What do they do to bring themselves really back with a chance of winning the race? And the other thing that's going to be really important is the rain. As you can see, there is cloud cover here at Le Mans, and clouds generally mean you have a higher chance of rain falling. And you can see on the weather map on the bottom left of your screen, the rain's not really coming just yet, but there is rain on the way. Don't forget, you can get involved with the stream on Twitter, hashtag GTR24H. And then you can let us know how you're watching the stream or when you expect the rain to be coming down. Maybe who you think will fare better in the wet weather condition, or wet weather conditions, I should say. And when we were talking to Alex all the way back on Thursday, which seems like so long ago now, we were talking about how that hypercar class might just really struggle. Just because it doesn't have any traction control, it doesn't have any ABS. It is a fully unassisted car. And when that rain comes down, that hypercar can really struggle. And we saw some of the LMP2 cars actually able to be pretty much as quick as the hypercars. So when that rain comes down, there might be a chance that some of those disgustingly quick hypercars, and by that I'm talking about Varga Sim Racing and Burst Edge Esports, who were the ones who had jumped ahead of Viaductin for a temporary amount of time in qualifying 2, they could find themselves battling with the likes of Viaductin in the race. And when it does rain, it is even easier, I want to say, to fuel save, just because you're not going to be pushing on the throttle that much out of corners anyway in those wet conditions where traction is, well, is a luxury at the greatest. Well, it's a luxury, to put it in simple terms. So we're just going to be seeing people being very easy on the throttle on the exit of corners. And yeah. Okay, so what is going on then? We have 42 minutes remaining of practice, and then we will make our way into the race. So I guess we have been, bringing this up for the entire morning and even yesterday evening as well. The battles that will be happening in each and every split, or I say split, in each and every class, because you look at the hypercar class and you know it's going to be Pinsims Drillers Esports, that is the number 10, the Dutch McLaren Senna, and then Seawolf RaceNet Motors. And we saw how quick Ibrahim Khan was in qualifying, and the two teams will look very even on at pace, and we should be seeing a very close battle in the hypercar class, just between those two teams at the very least. In the LMP2 class, of course, Burst Edge Esport and Varga Sim Racing, they looked super close. And then just a little bit further down, you had the likes of Eidos Motorsport in the 717 car. I want to say Musto GD as well. One Move Esports, who honestly I wanted to say almost were my championship favorites coming into this round, or at least from all the LMP2 teams that we had seen previously, I think they were the quickest. But they're not really up there, to be honest, and they were struggling that little bit more. HM Engineering is another team to potentially watch out for. GTE class though, Deuces Motorsport Club, Wojciech Polesny was very quick. And don't count out Musto GD. They will probably be starting on pole. David Greco, Tiziano Brioni, Giuseppe De Fuoco, Marco Massetti, and Giordano Valeriano are very quick. But on that note, we're going to be heading to a short commercial break. And when we're back, we'll be bringing you the next 50 minutes of practice.
The Endurance E-Racing World Championship Le Mans 24 Hours is brought to you by ESR Esports Network, Leap Gaming, SimLab, Husingfeld, Simplexity, Acetec, and AMD Ryzen Radio.
Do you like esports? Do you hate watching laggy streams of tournaments on 13-inch screens?
Oh my god! Of course you do. But you don't have to worry about that anymore.
He has a jump, son!
Complexity is a Danish designer and manufacturer of high-grade sim racing platforms. Their 3 different levels of platforms come in a variety of colors and configurations. Choose from the V4, built from 40 by 40 mm extruded aluminium profiles, the V8 built from 80 by 40 mm profiles, and the high-tier V12 built from 160 by 40 mm extruded aluminium profiles. Prices range from 470 to 750 euros. Go to facebook.com/simplexity.eu and start a messenger chat to inquire more about the options for colors and customization.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the GTR24H for the Endurance E-Racing World Championships here at Le Mans. We are approaching the final stages, I want to say, of practice. We have 45 minutes remaining before we do get underway with qualifying, and then the race in a few moments' time. And the race will be happening at 1 p.m. European time, which equates to 12 o'clock British time. And, well, if you're anywhere else in the world, I'm sorry, but I can't really help you with your time zones there. I advise using Google and working out time zone adjustments. Okay. So, for those of you who were with us, we were discussing, the teams to really watch out for at the top end of each class. We had got through the LMP2 class, we had got through the Hypercar class, and we were approaching the end of the GTE class. So we were mentioning how Deuces Motorsport Club want to watch out for quick and quali. Same goes for Musto GD and Ground Effect, same goes for Musto GD. But the other two to watch out for, WOSR, iZone Performance, and Satellite Racing. These 4 teams have been super close all throughout qualifying. It's been a top 4. It's been top 4 in both qualifying 1 and qualifying 2. So very interested to see how everything will kind of transfer into a race setting. But moving on to our next class, then it is the GT3 class. Team Rookie Monsters were, well, they were the big question marks, and with that McLaren 650S, and to be honest, after qualifying, there were even more question marks after a bit of a bump drafting strategy came through between the GT3 Team Rookie cars and the LMP2 Team Rookie cars, where the LMP2 car was seen pushing the Team Rookie Monsters car across all the way down the Mulsanne straight. It has been deemed by the race officials that no further actions will be taken. It was not deemed as a breach of the rules, and whether there will be an adjustment to the rules at a later stage is, well, will be determined. You would, I'm guessing, assume so, but we will wait for official announcements on that regard. So by that, Team Rookie Monsters, well, they qualified second in Q2 with a rather quick lap, but they were still unable to beat the lap that was set by Borja Milan in that one ACCA car, which was absolutely ridiculously fast. One ACCA and Borja Milan on a completely different level. And the other two cars to really watch out for is the DIS SR Lab car, Andy Kurtzen and Yannick Gottardsen, Kasper Hedegaard as well at the helm of the DIS car. And then, of course, Musto GD, you can never really count them out, no matter what class they're in, no matter what race they're in. And that is Daniela Primavera, Fabio Liozzi, Gugliello Occhipinti, and Matteo Boschetti. And I should not be that bad at pronouncing Italian names, but so I'm half Italian myself, but Gugliello, I've never seen that before, and I was just thinking, how do you pronounce that? Gugliello. Okay, but yeah, those are the teams to really watch out for. Team Rookie Monsters, not to Flame, not to BM, but I personally am expecting them to drop down the order, mainly because they won't have an LMP2 car pushing them off the start. So they might be finding themselves struggling just a little bit in that regard, and they'll have DIS and Musto all over them down into the Dunlop chicane. So it will be an extremely interesting affair in that regard, but let's see how well that McLaren 650S works, because Team Rookie Monsters were struggling just that little bit in qualifying 1, and whether they can pick things up for qualifying 2 will remain to be seen. Oh, sorry, whether they can pick things up for the race will remain to be seen. As Alex laughs at me for my inability to speak the English language. And I think Alex has something juicy planned for you guys, so do make sure you stay tuned. But you can, of course, still get involved with us on Twitter, hashtag GTR24H. Let us know how you are watching the show, you know, who you're here to support, and if you're a neutral fan, who you think might be taking the old win, because I do have that hashtag up and I am eagerly awaiting your tweets, your comments, whatever they may be. There was one from Mantis Records, and he dropped a little video. It was qualifying from Team Rookie Monsters. Teamwork makes dream work. He is, yeah, that is pretty accurate. We've got some jokes coming out as well, but still, there's a lot more that can be dropping in that Twitter feed. Why don't we take a little look? I wanted to say Jordi San Andres, but he's actually in the pits at the moment. DIS are out. And that white and grey McLaren. I guess we could just go through cars and remind everyone how to kind of identify cars quickly. As I've apparently been transported into Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, it seems, but it's a shame you guys can't see this on the camera. It's I don't know if it's if you could define it as cute or scary, but it's one of those. So the DIS SR Lab car, you can is the McLaren 720S, but you can just easily identify it. The white and grey, as well as the blue and yellow colors running from the rear spoiler all the way to the middle of the car, and that's how you would identify it from behind. If you guys have any particular car you would like us to look at and figure out an easy way to identify, then of course make sure you drop that in on the Twitter feed. Who else can we look at? Let's look at Jordi San Andres. So that is a Porsche 991, the WOSR iZone car. And I think this is probably one of the most standout cars. You can just identify it from the black and I almost want to say kind of coffee orange colors. And in the dark it might be slightly harder to identify, but the orange on the side and the black down the middle. We've only got 4 Porsches, and well, that's your way to identify one of them, really. Who should we go next? Let's look at Viaductin. So Viaductin are an extremely easy team to recognize. It's a McLaren Senna and it's orange. That's pretty much all you need to know to identify the Viaductin car out on the circuit. Let's take a look at ID SimSport. So ID SimSport, this is a bit of a trickier car to identify, but it is a dark blue, I guess an almost royal blue with light blue down the I don't know what you would say, down the lower parts of the car. And then on the side you can see that ID SimSport logo. But yeah, you've got the checkered yellow at the back as well on the rear fin. Let's go B32 Racing next. Oh wait, they're in the pits. Let's not go them. Dream Team. Okay, so the DSR cars are very easy to recognize. They are the Corvettes. And one of them, the Dream Team, has the black with the yellow. And then if we can find the Nightmare, you will be able to see fairly quickly the difference between these two cars. So where is the Nightmare team? It is not out at the moment. So the Nightmare team is just black and orange instead of, you know, the kind of black and blue that the Dream team has. It looks a bit meaner, it looks a bit nastier, and it is a little bit quicker as well. Let's take a look at the man who'll probably be starting on pole in the Hypercar class, which is this man here, Henry Sinek, in the Pin Sim car. The white front to the McLaren Senna with a bit of an orange rear, but a much lighter orange than the Viaductant car. And you can probably also recognize it because on the front it'll usually have the number 01 to notify everyone that it is in first place as well. Let's take a look next at Pro Sim. So this is quite similar to, what was the car we were only just recently looking at, ID Sim Sport. So all black at the front with some orange writing and a few spots of logos, but otherwise it is a pretty difficult car to identify. And when you do have 15 LMP2 cars, as in the background we see a Kona getting sent absolutely flying by, I think that is the McLaren Senna of, I want to say it's the McLaren Senna from our expected race winners, Pin Sims Drillers Esports, but I may be mistaken as it was a little bit blurred in the background. Okay, who should we look at next? Let's take a look at Mark Veit. Mark Veit in... Okay. And Mark Veit in that number 66, that's a Scuderia Basileia car. The Swiss team in that purple and green, that is a very, very nice looking car. I do have to admit, and probably one of my favorite looking cars out on circuit right now as well. Just getting some rather controversial messages coming through from my co-commentator, who would like to stay anonymous at this point in time, but you all know who it is. So, yes, I keep going to cars that are in the pits. I'm going to stop doing this. Let's go and look at Vojta Polesny, who's in the pits. I just said let's not do that. Okay, Ferris Stanley in the 959. That is HM Engineering. You've got the H logo at the front. The, is that a maroon red or burgundy? I think it's a burgundy red would be the best way to describe it, but that's how to identify the HM Engineering car. Who else can we take a little look at? Have we seen Ernest Lappins yet? That is the Pin Sim. That is the number 17 Pin Sims Drillers Esports car. Very similar design to the McLaren Senna Pin Sims car. You've got that orange at the rear, white at the front. It looks fairly good. But yeah, that is the Pin Sims Drillers car. Let's take a look at Davide Arduini in the number 33 Drive Game Seat RT. Red and black is the name of the Oreca. And you've got that 33 number right up at the front. And a black rear end of the car. David Greco is in the pits, never mind. I keep doing this. Okay, what about Malcolm Smith? That is a Team Rookie Monsters car. All of the Team Rookie Monsters cars are fairly easily identifiable. They are white with the different kind of blue colors kind of dotted around the car. And you get some of those disjointed stripes, I want to say, as you can see on the side of the current 650S. Dylan Tarbotton in the 337. It's white. It's got those blue colors dotted around. It's probably a Team Rookie Monsters car. That is the 337 of, you guessed it, Team Rookie Monsters. Peter Schultz in the 717. That is Eidos Motorsport. And that is the yellow and white front end of the Oreca. The kind of black running on the fairing somewhat. Then you've got the second DIS car, which again, it has that black and green, the blue and green stripes along the middle, but instead of being white, it is black to signify that it is the dark horse of a DIS. ID Sim Sport, we had a little look at their LMP2 car, and now we take a look at their GTE car It is the Aston Martin Vantage. And once again, it is white and blue, and it has a very nice little fade to dark blue at the rear. I do admit I really like the rear end of that Aston, mainly for the color scheme that they've gone with. We then look to, let's go to Van der Velde. Thank you, Alex. Alex actually told me this before, but I've completely forgotten. So this is the 404 GT3 car. And that is Glam Racing, and hopefully we won't be getting no error 404, Glam Racing not found. Purple, black and white, but mainly purple. If you see a purple car, it's probably Glam Racing. It was funny. Chris Gonzalez then, the number 334. Fair racing team, they'll be looking for a fair race. Kind of a goldy orange and a little bit of white and black dotted around as well. A bit of a fiery car, I guess you could say. Alessandra Apolloni in the number 33, the Max Verstappen car, Drive Game CRT. I feel like we've already had a look at the Drive Game CRT, and I think we have, yes, because it's slightly higher up. Davide Arduini is out as well. So let's take a look at Matt Webb. Simply Race BMW, pretty much as easy as that. If you see a BMW out on track, it's Matt Webb. Or, well, it's Simply Race to be precise. Perby cars are also in the BMW, but Simply Race is very iconic. The blue and white and black, and any of our Sprint Series viewers would recognize that color scheme. Then we've got Matteo De Croo in the number 11. And that is the number 11 of One Move Esports, who were one of the quickest teams coming into this race. And that's a kind of a blue and black. Again, a lot of dark colors, dark color schemes coming through for the LMP2 cars will make it very difficult to identify them. But it's a blue, brown and black color scheme. Very, very tricky to spot. Let's take a little look then at... let's go with... There we go, Borgia Milan. We've gone in the pits now. We're taking a bit of a closer look. Borgia Milan in that 77. That is the one ACO McLaren 720S. And it's got a very nice little color scheme. Orange, white, black. Some gold as well. But on that note, it is 12:30, and we will be heading into a commercial break. And when we're back, we will be bringing you the final half an hour of practice. Maybe we can take a look at some more car liveries and ways to identify different teams. But we're heading into a break, and when we're back, we'll bring you the final half an hour of practice. Stay tuned.
The Endurance E-Racing World Championship Le Mans 24 Hours is brought to you by ESR Esports Network, Wheat Gaming, SimLab, Husingfeld, Simplexity, Acetip, and AMD Ryzen Radio.
Simplexity is a Danish designer and manufacturer of high-grade sim racing platforms. Their 3 different levels of platforms come in a variety of colors and configurations. Choose from the V4, built from 40x40mm extruded aluminum profiles, the V8 built from 80x40mm profiles, and the high-tier V12 built from 160x40mm extruded aluminum profiles. Prices range from 470 to 750 euros. Go to facebook.com/simplexity.eu and start a messenger chat to inquire more about the options for colors and customization.
like games? Do you like esports? Do you hate watching laggy streams of tournaments on 13-inch screens? Oh my god!
Of course you do. But you don't have to worry about that anymore.
He has a jump, son!
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the 2020 GTR24H Endurance E-Racing World Championship. My name is Alex Skinner. I'll be taking you through the next half an hour with my colleague Yusuf, who is just taking a slight break to make sure that he is make sure that he's refreshed before the race, because of course he has taken you through the past half an hour of the pre-race build-up. But of course, as you join us here, we are at the Circuit de la Sarthe in northern France. And of course, we've got a very action-packed race for you all today. Of course, a over 40 car grid, split over 4 classes. And of course, we'll be taking you through live all 24 hours of the event. They will be split over multiple parts, over the multiple streams, but they will all be here on the same channel. Of course, wherever you are watching from, however you will be watching our race coverage today and tomorrow, you can get involved with the hashtag GTR24H hashtag on Twitter. Myself and Yusuf will be keeping an eye on the hashtag throughout the event. And of course, we will be joined by some very experienced commentators later. Of course, Cameron Roger and Ewan O'Leary, just to name 2. And hopefully, Ocean will be joining us as well through the night. Now, hopefully you all are ready with the popcorn and also very, very ready with the drinks to keep yourselves awake through the night, because of course full coverage of the event will be brought to you by us here at GTR24H. We're currently having a look at the Burst Edge Esports car, and that is currently being driven by Jesper Pedersen. He is actually he's actually the fastest LMP2 on the server at the moment, though. Only second fastest overall, because of course Mugfight in the number 66 Scuderia Basilia car is at the front of the field. But of course, we want to also apologise, because I can hear it in my own ears, but if any of you are hearing a ringing whenever I go quiet, we do apologise. We will try and get that fixed as soon as possible. But hopefully that shouldn't take too long, or shouldn't be too big of an issue for you all. But having a look a bit further down the order, going to have a look at the fastest, one of the fastest GT cars on the server at the moment. That is Jordi San Andreas, the number 51. Those guys have been extremely quick all weekend. And actually, looking through, obviously, in the qualifying order, that car was in a very, very good place indeed. Actually, the 51 car being second place in qualifying. Only actually 4/10 of the pole sitting GTE car, which of course is the 65 satellite racing car. But of course, if you want to talk about close gaps in qualifying, you do have to go to LMP2, because what we saw last night, and we were mentioning this on the broadcast, was that fight between Burst Edge Esports, the number 5 car, which had Jene Simoncic at the wheel, and the number 117, the Vargasim Racing car, with Cinchik at the wheel. Well, the gap at the end of that qualifying between those two, the pole sitter and the second place car, was 0.039, so 39 thousandths of a second between the two after the lap averages. That shows how close those two teams are in qualifying, and hopefully those two teams can be just as close during the race. Now, of course, 24 hours, anything can happen. That's the one thing that any driver will tell you, especially here at Le Mans. The race is not won until the checkered flag falls, and you're not even really thinking about the end until you get out of the night. And of course, there's going to be plenty of nighttime here at the Circuit de la Sarthe, because of course, we will only spend a few hours in the daylight before the track starts to get darker. And as we've seen in warm-up, that track's getting dark already because those rain clouds have been looming over. Hopefully we can get the weather radar up for you as well, because we noticed during the practice earlier on that weather radar was getting pretty wet, but as you can see right now, it is clear skies as far as the eye can see here at Le Mans. And well, for some of the teams like Burst, who last night were saying that they wanted it to stay as dry as possible for as long as possible, they're getting their wish, Yusuf.
They are indeed, and it looks like, well, we've been promising everyone rain, and now I feel like
it's come back to bite us, Yusuf.
It feels like F1 Barcelona this year.
Yes, the one race where everyone was promised rain, and then all of a sudden it was dry.
Yes.
So again, we've got plenty of time, 24 hours of racing. It's plenty of time for rain to come. And as we saw on the radar, there were splotches of rain just over sort of the northeastern coastline of France. So, well, sorry, the northwestern coastline of France. It helped I get my geography the correct way around. But of course, plenty of time for that rain to come over the track here. And of course, plenty of time for you to get involved. As we said, the hashtag GTR24H, get involved, get talking, get tweeting, get involved in the chats wherever you are watching us from.
Yeah, without a doubt, we are keeping a firm eye on Twitter just to see what is dropping down. And I don't like the last thing being me looking fat, doing some kind of video. So please, guys, drop some stuff in so I don't have to see that image every time I look to Twitter. But we do have 20 minutes before the race starts, and I mean, everything it has been, you know, not just for us as commentators, for the production team, for the teams themselves, for the drivers, has been building up to this. I mean, qualifying in the grand scheme of things means, I mean, it means practically nothing, right? It's a 24-hour race. It doesn't matter if you're starting third compared to sixth. At the end of the day, it's how you perform in those 24 hours. No one's going to be super aggressive on the first lap. They're going to give each other room. And I hope that's not a commentator curse.
I was about to say, that's what we hope. Anyway.
That's what we hope.
Again, you know, we had all of the qualifying. I didn't really hear. I was busy setting some things up, but I didn't know if you heard, if you did go through the full qualifying order in its entirety at all.
No, we have not done that.
Well, I think we have some time now to go through that, because of course, again, I did briefly mention that fight in LMP2, again, between the Burst Edge Esports Cup and the Satellite Cup, the Varga Sim Racing 117. But let's go through the grids and what we're going to do. I think if I'll give Yusuf the faster cars, I'll give him the more important class roles, and I'll go through the GT cars this time. So Yusuf, take it away with Hypercar.
So in the Hypercar class, Pinsim's Drillers Esports, they are out on top. A 317.692 average. Henry Cynic takes a pole ahead of Ibrahim Khan for Seawolf Net Race Motorsport. E-Team Brit in third ahead of Viaducton. Elite Sim Sport Racing team in fourth. And then the team that weren't able to make either qualifying sessions actually is Scuderia Basilea, and they will be starting dead last in the Hypercar class. And then I guess we can switch on over to the LMP2 class. Burst Edge Esports, they are on pole with a 3:24.245, and 400ths behind them is Varga Sim Racing in that 117 Oreca. Then we've got Eidos Motorsport in P3. Good job, Alex. Followed by Drive.
It's not me you got to thank, it's Lucas Amelia you've got to give the credit to in that car.
I'm giving you credit for hiring him.
Well, if you want that, you've got to give credit to Alistair Long and Peter Schulze, as they were the ones that got them on board.
Better livery wins.
Well, you rated us a 4 out of 10, so you can't even say that.
But I never said what I rated the other liveries. But, okay, moving on. Drive Game Seat RT are in P4. Head of Pinsim's Drillers Esports, who weren't able to do as well as their sister team in the Hypercar class, while Move Esports are just one place behind, ahead of HM Engineering, Fair Racing Team, and Musto GD. AC Sim Motorsports are one place further back, ahead of Team Rookie Monsters, our championship leaders. outside of the top 10. ProSim 1 place behind, followed by the second Team Rookie Monster team, and actually that is our Team Rookie Monster team that are leading the championship. Mantis Wreckers putting in a time, or an average time I should say, of a 9:12.6, and then you've got ProSim, and then pardon me, and then you've got Satellite Racing, ID Sim Sport completing the grid.
And then we'll move down to the GTE category, the most contested GT class, or one of the hardest GT classes to actually take the pole in. And of course, that was taken by the number 65 Satellite Racing Porsche 911 RSR. That was with a 3 minutes 47.85, and that will be started today by Jimmy Nizula. And of course, they just topped out ahead of the number 51, the World of Sim Racing iZone Performance car, the Spanish Porsche entry with 3 minutes 48.2. Only 4/10 separated that car. That car is going to be started by Jordi San Andres. Then we move down to third place, the number 74, Deuces Motorsport Club, the American entry, with a 3 minutes 48.352. It was very close between second and third in GT, and that car is going to be started by Wojciech Polesnik. We then move down below them. We then get to the DGTL, the number 12 car, one of the most successful teams in GTR24H history. And they had an average, well, they had quite a high, they had an average of 3 minutes 50.138, and that car is going to be started by Kasper Høgaard. So they will be then starting ahead of the ID Sim Sport, another one of the Danish entries here today. The Solar, oh wait, no, I take that back, sorry. One of the two Aston Martin entries here today at 3 minutes 50.783. And of course, those guys sharing the same simulator. Then it will be the 15 Simply Race car, the second place car in the championship, starting a fair few places ahead of their rivals today. Could it be the day where Simply Race take the GTE championship? Well, 24 hours will tell us that story indeed, or maybe not. It depends on if either car makes it to the finish. But then, obviously, that is the BMW M8 GTE entry. That has Matt Webb starting that car. That'll be the 166 ID Sim Sport car. Another one of the Aston entries, a 3 minute 50.9. And then you'll be followed by the Purby cars, the number 78. So that was a 3 minutes 51.0. Musto 53 car, your title leaders coming into this round in the one of the two Ferrari entries will be in be started by David Greco here for this event, followed by the 72 Grand Effect Sim Racing Team Car. That will be started by Dan Hutt. Then we move to the quite controversial time, but of course, what we will do is we're going to have to take a quick break because it's time for the Danish national anthem. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the EEWC Championship here from GTR24H here at the Circuit de la Sarre. I am Alex Skinner. Alongside me is Yusuf, as always. And of course, Yusuf, we come here 15 minutes before we go into the race session. And of course, all these drivers making their final changes, just sort of chilling out now, just getting used to it, adjusting themselves. And well, not long to go, Yusuf.
Not long to go at all, just over 10 minutes, and I guess these 10 minutes are probably going to be the uneasiest for especially the starting drivers, who will just be waiting, you know, getting ready, and there's nothing they can really do except for just practice, and you can throw as much practice as you want, but when that race start comes through and you're all rushing through the Dunlop curve down into the Dunlop chicane, absolutely anything can happen, and we'll be hoping for everyone that they can make it through those first couple of corners. And that whole first lap, to be honest, nice and cleanly, and well, we're somehow going to have to keep an eye on 4 different classes, 4 different class battles for the lead all at the same time. Maybe we've got a trickier job.
I think, yeah, it's going to be interesting, but of course the race will calm itself down at some stages, so we'll be able to at least take a bit of a break, take a bit of a more chilled approach to this, and maybe even crack a few jokes every now and then through the race. And of course,
us crack jokes?
Oh, never. But of course, plenty of time left in this session itself. We've got obviously 15 minutes until we go into the race, and just having a look at some of the other guys that are on serve at the moment. And one of those being the number 97, sorry, that is the, oh God, I'm sorry, I haven't got my paper here. The Elite SimSport Racing team, the McLaren Hypercar, that's just dropped back to the pits. So the luck of us here is always great. So we're going to have a look at the number 14 Viaducting car, because hopefully they won't go back to the pits in the time it takes me to explain how they've been doing this weekend. Of course, coming into this race as the title victors, no differences, no nothing. They are absolutely impossible to beat in the championship title, both mathematically and probably in terms of the race. But of course, we did get that amazingly titanic fight in a Hypercar, and we will apparently be having a server restart. So what we are going to also do in a moment is go back to having a look at some of the liveries that are here, and we'll do that now actually, so that we can all make sure we get some time on the screen.
Of course, we have to restart the server, as one of the cars cannot join the server at this present time.
Yeah, so just hearing from race control Nick Newcomb that one of the cars having an issue joining the server, so that is what the server restart is for. And well,
with 15 minutes to go, it's perfectly understandable. And if you have a look on your screen now, you're seeing some of the cars that have been entered into the race. All the photos done by Luca D'Amelio. It's great to see how gorgeous some of these cars look coming into this race.
Yeah, and some of them do look absolutely fantastic. And, you know, we were having a bit of a talk on identifying the cars, and very easy in your Hypercar class as well as your GT3, GTE class. But that LMP2 is so difficult, especially with having 15 cars of the exact same make, and a lot of them are having very similar liveries, a lot of dark colors coming through. So we'll try our best to identify those liveries and bring you the race as well as we can. And it'll be myself and Alex Skinner bringing you the first 4 hours, or is it first 6 hours, before Ewan O'Leary and I think Ewan O'Leary
and 3 hours, and then they take over at 5 p.m. local time. So we'll be taking you through the first 3 hours of the action from 1 p.m. local time to till 5 p.m. local time. So then that will mean that Ewan O'Leary and Cameron Roger will return to take you through the sort of into the night here, as the track goes dark and the track goes into the phase of headlights. Yes,
it looks like 4 hours to me.
Yes, 4. I miscalculated. Shush. Look. We agreed on this last night. Never get me to do maths on stream.
I didn't want to. You're the one who brought it up.
Yes, I know, but still. But of course, obviously, you will have multiple conversations here tonight. Obviously, myself and Yusuf, Ewan O'Leary, Cameron Roger, and Ossian Fucker joining us in the night. Yes?
Yeah, nothing.
What are you laughing at now?
I completely misheard you, and I heard something completely else, and I have a feeling our entire stream heard that as well.
How else do you expect me to pronounce his name?
Ossian Puhaka.
I've always been told it's pronounced the other way.
Oh, okay, fine. In that case, I apologise, but because I've never heard the correct pronunciation, so.
Well, he'll probably message me later, going, "Excuse me."
It's all on you, Alex. I'm sure Ossian will alert everyone as to how his name is actually pronounced. And however, we have 7 minutes before the race start. We've talked about the Hypercar, we've talked about every single one, but we haven't gone through that GT3 grid order just yet. So, with that being said, I will take you through the grid order.
GT3.
Ooh, GT3s. So, starting from pole in the GT3 class in the McLaren 720S, you guessed it, it's Borja Milan with an average time of a 3 minute 48.2. So 3:48.2 coming through from Borja Milan, and then Daniela Primavera for Musto setting a 3:52.8. So 3:48.2 and 3:52.8. Over 4 seconds separating the two cars. That is an incredible amount. I still have absolutely no idea how Borja Milan pulled out a 3:45. Borja Milan in Quali 1 was quicker than any GTE class by 3 seconds nearly. 3 seconds, and that is an incredible gap. Honestly, Borja Milan, what a phenomenal drive from him to pull that lap off. Daniela Primavera starting for Musto, as we mentioned. DIS SR Lab, we would presume is Andy Kurtzen starting, but it could be Yannick Gottardsen or the third driver, which is, if I get my notes out right here, is Kasper Hedegaard. So 3 drivers for DIS SR Lab. And then as we make our way down to 4th place is Malcolm Smith for Team Rookie Monsters. They were the ones full of the controversy after Quali 2, where they were seen being pushed by an LMP2 car. No further investigation, deemed to have not gone against the rules. So Malcolm Smith starts in P4. DSR Nightmare, the 777, I can't say the 777, can I? It's the 777 car or the 777 car of DSR Nightmare will be starting in P5, an average time of a 3:53.37, just 300ths off the average time of Team Rookie Monsters. Then we've got Van der Voorde, who will be starting in P6 ahead of Matthias Blom in the Callaway Corvette. That is the DSR Dream Team car. Korholm will be starting in P8 for the number 32. That is the B32 Racing, and behind him is Jesper Pedersen in the 188 Teleforeningen car. And then you've got Alvaro Incausti, one of my favorite drivers, in the number 23. And that is the number 23 car.
Sim Racing Motorsports car. It's the Italian McLaren entry. That is the 23
all drivers.
And you can identify that car because it is lovely in green. Then you've got DISSR Lab starting in P11, and behind them is the Danish Racing League, who had one of their lap times invalidated. Alex, I've only just realised now how fast Borja Milan was in that Q1.
Well, this is where the this is kind of where the controversy comes in, because that car, alongside the 999 car, as we saw, was under investigation for drafting. But
oh, they did it as well.
They did it in Q1. That is how they were 5. That was how they were 2 seconds quicker than GTE cars, Yusuf. But of course, I will mention now, I had to run very quickly because I did get I got a very frantic wave from race control, who I know are going to be listening to us and trying to not look too embarrassed as I look over the side of the tyres. We basically have been running off an online spreadsheet for the grid and everything that has been all made up. Everyone's had, their positions all tracked, and suddenly I see
it's all wrong.
No. I saw at the corner of my eye. She's one of our lovely race controllers, Hella. She came up to us and was like, "Oh no, the grid is wrong. The grid is wrong." And I said, I looked over and she said, it's from this spreadsheet. I said, yes, the spreadsheet we're using updates automatically whenever you make an edit to it. So we've just basically both race control and commentary and panics and like basically sent each other into a complete comedic panic for absolutely nothing. But at least it keeps us laughing and makes us, you know, and makes us enjoy what we've been doing today. So of course, we've relaxed now, Yusuf, and of course, with 3 minutes to go, we've got plenty of time. So we get getting back into the server, as we did, we'll have to sort everything else.
Yes, of course. We have a couple of minutes left before we do make our way into the race. Well, things are tensing up, but things are hardening up. Things will be getting spicy, to say the least. And don't forget, this is your pretty much your last chance to get involved on Twitter. I mean, you can get involved throughout the entire race, but our last chance to really remind you before the race starts, hashtag GTR24H. No matter if you're on YouTube, on Facebook, watching on Amazon, Fire, or through any other service, you can get involved on Twitter. So make sure you do that. Let us know, you know, just whatever it is you guys want to chat about, and we can, why not, we can bring that up on stream, whatever it is. E-Team Brit, make people know that they're going to be going racing soon. And well, we're very interested to see what E-Team Brit can do, because they were meant to be with us at Matsusaka, but they were unable to join.
Yeah, starting third on the Brit and Hypercar class after very, very impressive qualifying. Also benefiting from the lack of pace from Viaducton in Q1. Obviously, Viaducton jumping them in the second qualifying session, but not by enough. I think the actual gap between the two cars in the end was 7 tenths. So, yeah, it's a very close qualifying for those two indeed. But of course, we will be back momentarily for the official race broadcast, because we now have to make sure that we can swap over to our part 1 of the live official race broadcast here from the GTR24. So, bring your popcorn, bring the drinks. We will see you in a few minutes.